I couldn't believe my eyes. Simone, my spouse for 5 years, was shirtless on the lap of a guy in the hot tub below. Their expressions made it evident they were engaging in lovemaking activities. Fuming, I angrily filmed a brief video with my phone. Although I contemplated changing into swim trunks, I decided against it, opting to sit in the room, pondering why she didn't want me at the party. Working as a secretary for SG Funds, a hedge fund company, for about a year, she seemed genuinely happy. Now, the reason behind her contentment became clear. Earlier that week, I came across a text on her phone regarding a company Christmas party with a +1 invitation. When I brought it up, she attempted to dissuade me, expressing concerns about potential boredom amidst financial experts discussing money. Puzzled, I inquired if she felt ashamed to be seen with me. She reassured me, noting it wasn't about embarrassment, but the anticipated dull discussions about money at the event. The monthly parties hosted by her company were typically for staff only, leading to Simone being away until late at night or the next day. I never made a fuss about it before, but now I gained insight into what unfolded at these events. My response was an understanding acknowledgement. She then mentioned that if I chose to attend, I should ensure my tux was cleaned. However, she cautioned me, expressing doubt that I would find the event enjoyable. On the day of the party, she suggested I bring swim trunks, and I questioned the appropriateness of swim trunks for a December Christmas party. She explained that they usually end up in her boss's penthouse after the main party, which has a nice hot tub. I acknowledged this information, and she admitted that they do this pretty much every time. She then requested that I promise to be on my best behavior that night, to which I assured her that I always am, though it didn't sound promising. Curious, I asked why she was sharing this information with me. She explained that these parties could get quite wild sometimes, and she didn't want me to get upset, mentioning that the guys there are quite friendly and can get pretty handsy. I inquired about potential issues, stating that as long as everything passes the husband test, there shouldn't be any problem. In response, she smiled and kissed me on the cheek without verbalizing anything. At the main party, Simone introduced me to her friend Linda, stating that I was her husband. Linda smiled at me and questioned the term husband, suggesting that it was going to be fun, and referring to Simone as a wild and crazy girl. Wondering about the meaning behind Linda's comment, Simone smiled and giggled. She informed me that she needed to go mingle, and instructed Linda to accompany her to get something to drink, specifically asking for wine. Without giving me a backward glance, they left. I went to the bar, ordered her wine, and got a beer for myself. Despite scanning the area, Simone was nowhere to be found. I searched for her but found no trace. After half an hour, I settled at an empty table, hoping she'd come looking for me. Meanwhile, I observed the lively dance floor, feeling ignored as people walked around me, as if I were invisible. It seemed she was right. I wasn't having any fun, and I grew increasingly frustrated that my wife had abandoned me. After nursing my beer for a couple of hours, I decided to call it quits. If Simone wasn't going to spend time with me, I'd head home and leave her with her friends. As I walked to the entrance, Simone and Linda approached with 3 other guys, one with his arm around Simone's waist. Simone skipped introductions, expressing a slightly intoxicated greeting of, "Oh, there you are." When she kissed me, I detected the taste of tequila and something else. I mentioned that I was about to go home since she had abandoned me 2 hours ago, asking where she had been. Simone blushed, avoiding eye contact as the guys smirked, and I chose not to confront them. Linda explained that they had been having a few shots. Simone looked puzzled at Linda's explanation, leaving me curious about the situation. I asked Simone about the shots, mentioning the taste of tequila and something else. She dismissed it, saying they were heading to Ben's place where the hot tub was warming up, and she asked if I was ready. I replied affirmatively and inquired if I would get to spend some time with her or if she planned to abandon me again that night. She assured me not to be silly and mentioned that I would see her later. She decided to ride with Linda and the guys, suggesting it was okay if I followed. I suggested she ride with me, but one of the guys grabbed Simone's hand and pulled her away, irritating me even more. They left, with Simone and Linda following the guys, and laughter echoed as they departed. I got my car and followed them. Upon arrival, I saw Simone in a bikini, leaving me puzzled. When we got there, Simone was already in the hot tub with the 2 guys, later revealed as Ben and Dale, the senior partners in the firm. They seemed like nothing more than wealthy frat boys. After they went outside, Linda approached me and asked if I thought we could get together later tonight. I responded by asking what made her think I would be inclined to do that, emphasizing that I'm married. She expressed surprise, mentioning that she thought we had an open marriage based on Simone's interactions with other guys, especially the way Simone had kissed me earlier. Confused, I inquired about what she meant by the way Simone had kissed me earlier. Linda revealed that Simone had already been with Ben and Dale. Disgusted, I felt a wave of nausea, and Linda's expression changed as she realized my shock. She exclaimed, "Oh my God, you didn't know, did you?" I admitted that I didn't and asked how long this had been going on. Linda disclosed that it had been happening ever since Simone joined the company over a year ago. Shocked, I processed the information, realizing that Simone had been involved with them the entire time, and I had no idea. I questioned if that was what she was doing at the party. Linda disclosed that Simone had been involved with 2 guys and a few others, expressing apologies and assuming I knew about it. She reassured me that Simone genuinely loved me, to which I replied sarcastically, expressing skepticism about feeling the love. Linda suggested I go upstairs and change, hoping Simone would keep herself under control with my presence. I scoffed at the suggestion, but headed upstairs. That's when I saw her with those 2 guys. Despite my love for her, I found it intolerable and decided to confront her, going downstairs. Simone greeted me as I reached the bottom of the stairs, questioning why I wasn't in my bathing suit and if I was joining them in the hot tub. I grabbed her arm, pulled her into a nearby room, and closed the door. Demanding to know if she would ever tell me about having an open marriage, I mentioned what Linda had told me and played a video on my phone showing her with the 2 guys in the hot tub. I questioned the situation, wondering if she aimed to humiliate me further after abandoning me at the party. Simone downplayed it, claiming they were just having fun, admitting to lovemaking acts with them, and asserting it didn't mean anything. Shocked, I disagreed, emphasizing that it meant everything. I took off my wedding ring and placed it in her hand, then removed her rings from her left hand. She asked what I was doing, and I told her I found her actions disgusting, expressing my current hatred towards her. I wished her a Merry Christmas, mentioned I would be seeing a lawyer about a divorce on Monday, and instructed her not to bother coming home. Despite her pleas and declarations of love, I remained indifferent, stating that I no longer cared about her desires. Asserting that I knew the truth and understanding why she didn't want me to come with her, I bid farewell to Simone and left. One of the guys, uncertain which one, called after me, questioning why I was leaving so soon and complimenting Simone. I replied casually, saying she was now theirs. Leaving the penthouse, I went downstairs to my car and drove home. Simone began calling and texting me, but I ignored her attempts to reach me. Upon arriving home, I deleted her messages and blocked her number. I changed out of my tux, grabbed some trash bags, and started tossing her clothes and things into them. I put them into her car and pulled it out of the garage. I removed the garage door opener and changed the code so she couldn't get back inside. By then, it was about 2:30 a.m., and I was dead tired. I fell on the bed and instantly went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to the sound of our house phone ringing. I picked it up without thinking. "Yeah," I said when I answered. Simone called, requesting me to come and get her. I responded that she was no longer my concern. She pleaded for a conversation, but I insisted that any communication could go through my lawyer. I informed her about her car being in my parking space with all her belongings packed, and then I hung up. Despite her immediate callback, I disconnected the house phone, having no intention of encountering her face or hearing her voice again. I fell back on the bed and went to sleep, plugging the phone back in. When I got up that afternoon, after I finally woke up enough to be coherent, I looked and saw that her car was gone. Good. Maybe she finally got the message. I started looking online for a divorce lawyer and read all I could find about the divorce laws in our state. This was a community property state, but we didn't own any real estate, so that wouldn't be an issue. We had no children, so there would be no child support. She made as much, if not a little more than me, so I didn't think there would be any alimony. I also found that while most divorces in this state were no fault, there was a provision to file on the basis of infidelity, cruelty, or misuse that would make the divorce more costly and take more time to resolve. But I didn't care about that. After looking, I noted the number for one Jenny Hawkins, attorney at law, and decided to give her a call on Monday. While making notes, my cell phone rang, and I noticed an unfamiliar number. Considering it could be Simone or anyone else, I chose to answer. A female voice identified herself as Linda and informed me that Simone was staying with her for a few days. I confirmed my intention to proceed with the divorce. Linda expressed concern for Simone, describing her as a wreck crying in her room and fearing a nervous breakdown. I remained indifferent, stating that Simone brought it upon herself. Linda inquired about any lingering feelings I might have for Simone, to which I responded with current sentiments of hatred and disgust. I emphasized that Simone had been unfaithful for over a year and had the audacity to publicly humiliate me, leading to the conclusion that our relationship was over. Linda mentioned that Simone loves me, and I responded skeptically, asking about Simone's actions after I left and the duration of their stay at the penthouse. I questioned if she slept with Ben and Dale again, seeking clear answers. Linda acknowledged that they all got together after my departure to console Simone, suggesting I could have enjoyed the evening if I had stayed. I expressed disbelief, asking where people like her came from, and then ended the call, saying goodbye. After hanging up, I noticed 2 text messages from unfamiliar numbers that arrived early in the morning after I had gone to bed. Upon checking, I found videos attached to them. One message stated, "Missed one hell of a party, bro." I played the video and witnessed Simone engaging in lovemaking activities with 3 men at the penthouse. While Ben and Dale were recognizable, the third person was unfamiliar. The man I didn't recognize looked into the camera and spoke. "That's quite a wife you have there, brah," he said with a grin. "Too bad you weren't here." The second video was more of the same, except it ended with Ben having my wedding ring. As Simone held it in her open hand, she looked at the camera with a smirk. My hatred for her only grew exponentially. I transferred the videos to my PC and made a copy of them for the lawyer. I thought about sending the videos to all of her friends and her family, but decided against it, at least for now. The info I got from Jenny's website indicated that I needed to be very careful about how I reacted to her actions. Any negative reaction on my part could easily undo my case. Her site warned okay, so I decided to hold off for the time being. I didn't hear anything from Simone or Linda the rest of that day or the next, which was a good thing as far as I was concerned. I spent the remainder of the weekend eradicating Simone's presence from the apartment. On Monday, I reached out to my boss, detailing the situation, and took a brief vacation. Recognizing my diminished worth during this time, my boss, having experienced a divorce from an unfaithful spouse, empathized with my emotions. I contacted Jenny's office, scheduling an appointment for that afternoon. En route to the appointment, I visited the bank, implementing measures to disentangle her from our joint account. I settled her joint credit card and subsequently canceled it, withdrawing half of our assets to establish a new account in my name. Jenny elucidated the divorce laws in our state and proposed pursuing an alienation of affection lawsuit against her employers. Acknowledging the uncertain outcome, given the evidence I possessed, I entrusted her with the decision. Concerning the delivery of legal papers, I opted for their office, intending for them to experience a degree of the public humiliation they subjected me to over the past year. After our meeting, I paid a retainer and returned home. On the way, I received a call from Linda. "Hello," I answered. She proposed a meeting with Simone that afternoon, to which I declined, following my attorney's advice to maintain distance. She offered Simone's contact information after consulting with someone. After I provided Jenny's contact details, Linda attempted one last time to advocate for Simone. I firmly rejected any possibility of forgiveness, asserting that Simone could anticipate divorce papers soon. I concluded the call and proceeded home, stopping only to purchase a 12-pack of beer and a couple of packs of cigarettes. Having quit smoking when we first got married, I felt the need to engage in something to prevent destructive behavior after arriving home. The house phone rang, and when I answered with a greeting, Ben Carlson, my wife's employer, identified himself. Recognizing his voice from the party and noting a more professional tone, I acknowledged knowing who he was and asked about his intentions. Ben expressed awareness of my upset feelings about the events on Friday and claimed that they thought I was okay with my wife's activities at company gatherings. I questioned if he knew she was married during all this, and he admitted yes, but explained that Simone had told them we had an open marriage, and he assumed I was okay with it. I pointed out that he never bothered to ask me about it and inquired about the videos they sent me on Friday night. Ben stated that the videos were Simone's idea and apologized, expressing regret for the situation. He asked if there was anything he could do to make it up to me, to which I responded by outlining my terms. I mentioned my intention to kick his balls into the middle of next week after he testifies against her in court, and the plan to sue him for alienation of affection. I made it clear that if he wanted to make amends, he should accept my terms without any argument and asked if he had anything else to add. He inquired if I was truly suing them, and I affirmed, emphasizing their violation of their own morals clauses over the past year while destroying my marriage. He dismissed it, claiming it was all in fun, and they never intended to ruin my marriage. I questioned his expectations, expressing disbelief that I would applaud them for their actions. I suggested he might have been influenced by internet stories. He pleaded, proposing that we could work through the situation, and he worried that a lawsuit could ruin them. I dismissed it as not my problem and ended the call. Grabbing a beer, I went to the balcony for a smoke. I didn't hear from them until Wednesday when they were served at Simone's office. Linda expressed disbelief at my actions, stating that I didn't give Simone a chance to explain and highlighting her current humiliation. I remained indifferent, stating that I didn't care about Simone's feelings after what she did, and instructed Linda not to call again, slamming the phone down. A few moments later, I received another call from a number I recognized as coming from Ben's office. I answered, yelling, and he insulted me, threatening to kick my rear. He accused me of ruining his life and vowed to ruin mine in return. I slammed the phone down and called Jenny to tell her about Ben's threat. "Good," she said. "I'll file for a temporary restraining order against Simone as well as her cohorts today. I'll make sure you get a copy of the order. Remember what I said. Don't do anything stupid." "What if he comes after me?" I asked. "Make sure that you have witnesses and don't instigate anything," she said. I understood what she meant. Later that afternoon, there was a knock on the door. True to her word, Jenny had filed the TRO, and a courier had just delivered my copy. I decided to hedge my bets somewhat and purchased a small motion-activated camera to cover my front room. I also had a nice Louisville Slugger close to the front door, just in case. I figured if Ben or his accomplices intended to make good on their threats, I needed to have something for evidence, and I needed some means of protection. Things remained relatively peaceful for the rest of the week. Thankfully, I didn't hear anything from Linda, Simone, or her boyfriends until Saturday night, that is. I was sitting on my balcony nursing a beer and a cigarette when I heard my doorbell. That was followed up by pounding on the door. I ground out my cigarette and went into the front room and looked out the peephole in the door. Sure enough, it was Ben, and I could discern someone with him as the pounding on the door continued. He shouted for me to open up, claiming I was violating a restraining order. I informed him that I was calling the police, and he protested, yelling for me to open the door. I continued dialing emergency, and when the operator answered, I explained the situation at my door. The operator informed me that they had received multiple calls for that area and dispatched cruisers to my location. They advised against opening the door until the officers arrived, and I thanked them before ending the call. The pounding on the door continued, and I wondered if Ben was going to break it down. Clutching the bat tighter, I waited and heard a commotion. Looking through the peephole, I saw 2 large police officers putting cuffs on Ben and the other man with him. The officer knocked on my door, identifying themselves as police. I opened the door, and Ben looked at me as the officer led him back to the cruiser, yelling threats. The officer asked if I knew him, and I nodded, showing him a copy of my TRO. He read it, spoke into his radio, and informed me that they would be taking them downtown for the night. I explained my story, and he thanked me for the cooperation, expressing that he didn't think Ben would give me trouble for a while. I closed and locked the door, then returned to my balcony with a fresh beer. The news of Ben's arrest hit the papers the next day, with the headline reading, "Hedge Fund CEO Arrested." Over the next few days, articles revealed that several clients were leaving SG due to the company's involvement in ruining employees' marriages, impacting their bottom line. I thought, good. Returning to work the following Monday, it was challenging, but I managed to get some work done. After about 3 weeks of no contact, I received a call from Jenny. She greeted me and asked how I was holding up. I replied that I was doing as well as could be expected. Jenny informed me that Simone had obtained an attorney and they petitioned the court for marriage counseling. The judge had agreed, ordering 6 sessions starting that week. I inquired if they could mandate marriage counseling, and Jenny affirmed that they could. She advised me to attend, explaining that not showing up could result in contempt of court and even jail. I expressed my unwillingness to reconcile with Simone, and Jenny understood but emphasized the importance of my attendance. I reluctantly agreed, and Jenny mentioned that if the counselor perceived no hope for reconciliation, they would inform the judge. I asked if there was anything else, and Jenny revealed that Simone's attorney informed her of Simone's pregnancy. I expressed frustration at the prospect of waiting another 8 or 9 months for any legal actions. Jenny confirmed this delay, adding that if the child is mine, I would be ordered to pay child support. On a positive note, she informed me that the judge approved a legal separation until Simone gives birth. I sarcastically commented, and Jenny provided the counselor's address, wishing me luck. I noted the information on my calendar. I decided that I would make it clear in no uncertain terms there was no way I would ever reconcile with the cheater. When I got to the counselor's office, I was ushered right in. A somewhat older woman looked at me over her glasses. Simone sat across from her in a love seat, looking somewhat forlorn. I had a very bad feeling about this. The counselor, Dr. Abigail Farnsworth, introduced herself and suggested I sit next to Simone on the love seat. Opting for a smaller wooden chair at a 45-degree angle to the love seat, I expressed my lack of choice in being there. Dr. Farnsworth acknowledged this but conveyed her satisfaction that I attended. She then turned to Simone and inquired about her hopes for the sessions. Simone expressed her desire to reunite with me, emphasizing the upcoming baby and the wish to be a family again. I reacted with derision, and Dr. Farnsworth turned to me, asking about my expectations. I responded, expressing my desire for her to understand that reconciliation was not on the table, nodding in Simone's direction. I noticed Simone recoiling at my statement. Dr. Abigail nodded in response to my statement about not reconciling for the sake of the child. She asked if I would consider it for the child's sake, to which I reiterated my doubt about being the father and my commitment to support the child if it turned out to be mine. However, I firmly stated that reconciliation with Simone was out of the question. In response to her repeated question about the child's sake, I took out my phone and showed Abigail the videos that were sent to me, hoping to convey the depth of betrayal. She appeared disgusted after watching them, and as I put my phone away, I remarked on her marital status. I questioned how she would feel if the roles were reversed, and it was her husband in those videos, emphasizing the continuous betrayal over more than a year, and even in front of her. She insisted that the focus should be on the two of us and the upcoming child. I informed Dr. Abigail that Simone had a child to consider, expressing my doubt about being the father and expressing a desire for answers from Simone. Abigail, after a moment of consideration, nodded and suggested Simone owed me some answers. Simone, looking down and appearing sheepish with a face burning in embarrassment, finally looked up and agreed to provide answers. Abigail then gave me the opportunity to speak, and I turned back to Simone. I inquired if she knew what was going to happen on the night of the party, and she affirmed. I asked if that was the real reason she didn't want me to go, and she admitted it. Reflecting on the terrible experience, I accused them of planning to humiliate me, to which she reluctantly agreed. I further questioned if the intention was to humiliate me even more at Ben's place, and she confirmed it, appearing sheepish. I questioned Simone about the duration of her involvement with the other men at SG, and she admitted it had been ongoing since she joined the company. Puzzled, I asked for the reason behind her actions, to which she casually replied that she enjoyed it, finding it fun, naughty, and exciting, making her feel handsome. When I inquired about the number of men she had been with, excluding me, she nonchalantly mentioned around 4 or 5 dozen. I expressed shock at the revelation, emphasizing the potential risks of venereal diseases. Outraged, I asked if she knew the father of the child she was carrying, and she admitted uncertainty. Confronting her expectation for me to raise and financially support the child, I criticized her, stating my lack of love for her anymore and expressing strong resentment even hoping for a negative outcome. Simone and the others appeared shocked by my words, and Simone seemed on the verge of tears, though my anger remained unabated. In my attempt to inflict more emotional pain, Abigail intervened, signaling that I had made my point. I rejected the notion that I was discarding 5 good years of marriage, attributing the breakdown to Simone's infidelity. I contested the characterization of our marriage as 5 good years, emphasizing that the last year wasn't genuine, especially after Simone's admission of involvement with 48 to 60 men and uncertainty about the paternity of her child. Abigail concluded the session, stating her intention to conduct individual sessions with each of us before determining the next steps. We scheduled our appointments for the next week and left. Simone called out to me in the parking lot, but I ignored her and went to my car. Observing Simone sobbing over her steering wheel as I drove away, I harbored a sense of satisfaction, thinking it was fitting for her to experience some emotional pain. Later that night, I received an enraged call from Linda, blaming me for Simone's condition. She conveyed that Simone was in the hospital due to a mishap, and she accused me of mistreating her. I defended myself, asserting that I merely spoke the truth, contrasting it with Simone's actions over the past year. Linda questioned my apparent lack of concern for Simone being in the hospital, to which I responded indifferently. She criticized me as a loser and emphasized that I should at least provide insurance information, as Simone was still legally my wife, and I would be responsible for the bills. After a moment of reflection, I decided to visit Simone in the hospital, acknowledging the information Jenny had shared earlier. Linda provided me with the room details, and upon arrival, I approached the nurse, providing my insurance information and briefly discussing Simone's condition with the doctor. I inquired about the cause of the mishap, to which the doctor explained the complexities of pregnancies, leaving the specific cause uncertain. Curious about the duration of the pregnancy, I learned that Simone was approximately 9 or 10 weeks along, leaving a possibility that the child could have been mine. Nevertheless, I considered it inconsequential, as the mishap signaled the opportunity to proceed with the divorce. After inquiring about Simone's well-being from the doctor, who assured me she would be fine, I entered her room. She appeared distressed in the bed, tears in her eyes. Linda, positioned at the end of the bed, expressed her displeasure, to which I responded with a growl, causing her to retreat from the room. Facing Simone, I acknowledged the finality of our relationship. She questioned whether I truly hated her as much as I had claimed earlier, and I admitted that, at that moment, the intensity had lessened. However, I emphasized that reconciliation was out of the question, given the breach of trust she had demonstrated. Expressing my frustration, I conveyed how each trip she made to the store left me wondering if she was involved with the checkout clerks. I questioned the sudden turn of disrespect, emphasizing that I had treated her exceptionally well throughout our years together. She denied any wrongdoing on my part and acknowledged my role as a devoted husband and lover. However, I countered, stating that if that were the case, she would have resisted the advances of others. She admitted succumbing to the influence of others who claimed that it was normal for husbands to witness their wives with other men. I dismissed her explanation, emphasizing that the divorce was inevitable and any attempts to salvage the relationship were futile. In response to my decision, she tearfully accepted, agreeing to inform her lawyer the next day. I sternly clarified that any hopes of friendship were unrealistic. Despite her apologies, I remained resolute in my decision to end the marriage. I looked at her for a few moments. "Yeah," I said as I started to leave her room. "Goodbye, Simone." I could hear her cry as I walked away. Tough luck, I thought. Good riddance. A few days later, I received a call from Jenny. True to her promise, Simone abandoned all objections to the divorce. Abigail wrote a report stating that reconciliation was impossible. She suggested I undergo anger management. However, the judge concurred and made a similar recommendation. Although she stopped short of making it a court order, Jenny managed to secure settlements from SG funds as well as Ben and Dale. About a month later, she handed me the largest check I had ever seen in my life. "That's minus my fee, of course," she said. "Certainly," I replied. I deposited the check and moved on with my life such as it was. Update: SG, or Sodom and Gomorrah as I often thought of it, shut its doors approximately 6 months later. It appeared that clients lost trust in the company's financial integrity. Wonder why? I cynically mused to myself. Ben and Dale remained silent after that incident at the apartment. Both served a 30-day stint in the county jail for their stunt and seemed keen on avoiding a repeat. With their reputations tarnished in the community, they sought a fresh start on the West Coast. Simone and Linda continued sharing the same apartment, transitioning to employment in a strip mall retail store specializing in women's clothing and cosmetics. I encountered them occasionally, but never acknowledged their presence. Remaining single, I casually dated over the next couple of years. Eventually, I met Claire Hansen, a recent divorcee, and we embarked on a slow and easy dating journey for a few months. Like me, she had experienced the pain of infidelity in her previous marriage. Understanding her hurt, I provided all the support I could. In the initial weeks, our activities revolved around conversations or outings for dinner and a movie. Recognizing her vulnerability, I took the time to engage in comforting activities such as holding hands and enjoying leisurely strolls through the park. Despite finding her attractive, I opted to let her take the lead. After a delightful dinner at her condo, she observed me with a curious intensity, questioning whether I found her appealing. Responding with a smile, I assured her of my attraction, stating that it extended beyond physical aspects. Curious about my lack of initiative, she playfully inquired if I liked girls. My response conveyed a positive outlook on the situation.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm currently navigating an incredibly challenging and emotionally tumultuous situation, one that I never thought I'd have to face. It all began against the backdrop of what seemed like a successful and fulfilling life. I was juggling a full-time job in a lucrative industry, earning a comfortable six-figure salary, all while serving in the National Guard. Physically, I was in great shape, and I even managed to build my own house on a small farm, a project that filled me with pride. The relationship side of my life was equally significant. I had been with my partner for 11 years, and we took the step to get married just 2 years ago. We were in the process of planning to start a family, a dream we both shared. But then, the unimaginable happened. During my combat deployment, which kept me away for an extended period of over 6 months, I stumbled upon a shocking discovery. It was as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I learned that during my absence, my wife had an affair with the man she had hired to fix our fence. What stung even more was the realization that they had engaged in unprotected intimacy multiple times, and she had developed strong feelings for him. They shared experiences and emotions that she had never shared with me before. It was as if she had found the small-town cowboy she had always longed for, a persona I couldn't possibly embody. I had been living a life far removed from that image, and now I was grappling with the painful truth that she had found something in someone else that she couldn't find in me. What makes the situation even more complex is that my wife remains completely unaware that I know the full extent of their infidelity. Her behavior has been undeniably strange since I returned home. She claims she lived alone for a year, adjusting to my absence, but deep down, I can't help but believe that the real reason she's still with me is that I never left her, even when I discovered the betrayal. The question now is how to proceed, how to navigate the wreckage of trust and love that has been shattered by this shocking revelation. I find myself in a situation that's beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It's difficult to make sense of how everything has unraveled. I've always taken pride in being a responsible provider and protector, and yet, my wife chose to have an affair with a younger, attractive cowboy who, to make matters more complicated, is already married with kids and apparently sleeps with clients. The shock and pain run deep because my wife discussed starting a family with this other man, planning a life together, and even talked about having kids. Meanwhile, she's leading this double life, pretending that everything between us is perfectly fine. It's a painful paradox to witness her making plans for our future, like our planting season and buying more chickens, while she continues to deceive me on such a profound level. It's been incredibly difficult to maintain my composure throughout all of this. The military taught me to be stoic and tough, but I've reached a breaking point. I've confided in my Catholic best friend, sharing every detail of this heartbreaking situation with him. He believes in trying to salvage the relationship, but I'm beginning to lean toward filing for divorce and ending this chapter of my life. I'm convinced that even remaining friends seems impossible at this point. So, I've taken the initial steps by setting up meetings with 2 lawyers to begin the process of ending our marriage. What makes this situation even more emotionally taxing is my suspicion that my wife may lack remorse for her actions, leading me to wonder if she might be a sociopath. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to secure any in-person therapy sessions yet, as the earliest appointments are still over 3 weeks away, which is incredibly frustrating given the urgency of the situation. Just recently, I mustered the courage to confide in my mother and my closest friends. It was an emotionally challenging conversation, but their support and understanding have been a lifeline. I haven't confronted my wife about my knowledge of her affair yet, but I'm making preparations to do so. In just 2 days, I have legal consultations scheduled to begin the divorce process, as it seems increasingly clear that this relationship cannot be salvaged. The situation has escalated significantly, and I've taken some decisive steps to confront my wife about her affair. I decided to hire a private investigator, and the information that surfaced was nothing short of alarming. The man involved in the affair has multiple aliases, a suspended license, and a prior conviction. He's 28 years old, married with 2 children, and shockingly, he lives just a mere 15 minutes away from our home. Last night, my emotional turmoil reached a breaking point. I experienced a panic attack and woke up in tears while she slept beside me. When I apologized for my distress, she suggested that it might be related to workout supplements or something I picked up during my overseas deployment. I couldn't help but wonder if she was intentionally manipulating me or if she genuinely had no idea about the extent of the situation. The next day, I woke up after working the night shift at the refinery. My private investigator had informed me that she had lunch with this man at Qdoba while I was sleeping, despite her earlier claim of being out shopping. Confronting her about this blatant lie became inevitable. I had carefully planned to do so on her birthday, as I wanted to be in control of the situation and ensure closure on my terms. The day arrived, and it was surprisingly beautiful, considering the turmoil that was about to unfold. I woke up early, strangely calm, and prepared myself for the difficult conversation ahead. A long and strenuous workout helped clear my head. As my wife came home in the early evening, she looked radiant and excited. She had spent the day shopping and making herself look beautiful for her big day. I handed her a beautifully wrapped box, and her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she tore it open. The disappointment and shock on her face were undeniable when she found the neatly folded divorce papers inside. I mustered the strength to tell her about the affair, the involvement with the cowboy, and the countless lies that had built up over time. Each word I uttered felt like a heavy blow to her stomach. She collapsed, crying and pleading for forgiveness, but it was painfully clear that it was too late for reconciliation. The moment her parents called to wish her a happy birthday, I decided to lay everything bare. It was a gut-wrenching decision, but I knew it was the right thing to do. As they congratulated her on her special day, I couldn't bear the weight of the lies any longer. I began to tell them the painful truth, and all I heard on the other end was my mother-in-law's anguished screams. It was a devastating moment, and I knew there was no turning back. I had made up my mind to make her infidelity public. I sent emails to her family, friends, and colleagues, providing them with evidence of her betrayal. I was done protecting her reputation when she had shattered my trust so profoundly. The shock in her eyes was unmistakable as she answered call after call, her sobs and apologies filling the room. It was far from the birthday celebration she had envisioned. Finally, it was time for the last part of my plan. I swung open the front door, and right there on the porch were all her belongings. She was no longer welcome in our home. Her begging turned into loud cries, but I remained resolute. She had to gather her things and leave. A few days later, her sister and family began to gaslight me, placing the blame on me for the situation. They dismissed the fact that she had engaged in unprotected contact with another man, attributing it to my emotional unavailability. My wife even went as far as telling the cowboy's wife that everything was fabricated. Her family seemed to prioritize her over me, implying that I wasn't considered part of their family. They sided with her instead of helping us heal. Despite suggestions of individual therapy and working things out, my wife remained convinced that she could manipulate me into staying. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, she signed the divorce paperwork this morning, and I filed it. We had a lengthy conversation where she expressed a strong desire to repair our marriage, rating it at a 10 out of 10. She promised to make a sincere effort over the next 89 days to demonstrate her commitment. However, I couldn't find it in me to care anymore. It's been a few weeks now, and her calls and texts come less frequently. I've heard from mutual friends that she's not doing well, that she's miserable, alone, and filled with regret. She's reportedly searching for houses in Texas and attempting to transfer with her company. Today, on May 12th, the divorce has been finalized, marking the end of a painful chapter in both our lives. The aftermath of my divorce has brought significant changes to both of our lives. I ended up keeping the house while she made the decision to move to Texas and change jobs. Throughout this entire process, she has shown no remorse and has never taken responsibility for the destruction of our life together. Returning home from my challenging deployment in the Middle East to a situation that ultimately led to divorce was even more difficult to bear. These past few months since my return have unquestionably been the toughest period of my life. Every story has two sides, but this specific situation completely shattered me as a man. It felt like it broke me down to my very core, testing the foundation of who I am. I've had to rediscover my vulnerability and rely on the faith I found overseas as a source of strength. For that, I am profoundly grateful. Understanding why people commit hurtful actions or betray others has been a challenging question that I still don't have answers to. However, I've come to believe that everything happens for a purpose, even if that purpose was to show me that building a family and life with a specific person wasn't the intended path for me. My faith, the unwavering support of my closest friends from the academy, my friends and family back home, and the constant check-ins from the men and women I deployed with have been my lifelines during these dark moments. To those who consistently called and texted me during my darkest hours, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude. Your support meant the world to me. Now, it's time for a new chapter, a fresh beginning with someone who genuinely desires to create those stories alongside me. This experience has reshaped my perspective on life and relationships, and I'm hopeful for what the future holds. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I exposed my cheating wife and reclaimed my life after finding her betrayal in our marriage. Many dream of owning their own island, often picturing it in the warm Caribbean or South Pacific. Gananoque, a small town on the St. Lawrence River in Ontario, Canada, is part of the Thousand Islands region where both Canadians and Americans live on these islands. Some have castles, and dollar for dollar, these islands rival any in the world, despite being in the St. Lawrence River instead of the tropics. One popular story about the Thousand Islands involves salad dressing, supposedly invented by a local woman and later given to a New York hotel around 1890, though there's no written proof of this. I used to drive trucks for a living, delivering across the contiguous 48 states and Canada for a medium-sized company with about 100 trucks. Drivers could choose between long hauls, regional routes, or local transport. After a long trip of a week or more, we could opt to stay local for a week to spend time with family, or go back on longer trips. Sometimes we could even take our wives on the road. Most trucking companies that operate nationwide and in Canada keep their drivers on the road for weeks, impacting family life. Several professions strain families, with the military being the toughest, followed by trucking and law enforcement. I worked construction during high school summers, so it was natural to start working full-time after graduation. By age 23, I was a skilled carpenter. At 19, I met Julie Simpson, an office clerk at a commercial bakery, and we married at 21. We were happy until the banking and construction industries faced severe losses. Julie and I decided I should try truck driving for better pay, despite the drawback of being away from home. The company offered to pay for my truck driving school if I committed to a year with them. After getting my Class A CDL, 3 weeks later, I was accepted and paired with an experienced driving instructor who taught me the ropes of handling loaded trailers weighing 16 to 36 tons. Scheduled for weeks with my instructor, I convinced the safety department I was ready in 4. After a week in the city and another on local roads, everything went smoothly. I arranged for Julie to collect my paycheck on Fridays from the office, which worked well. After months, while finishing up a week of local driving, my dispatcher, Shirley, offered a good opportunity. I had cargo heading to Vancouver with a return load to Montreal, or rather, to Gananoque. The young company owner, just a few years older than me, had recently bought one of the Thousand Islands, complete with 2 houses. He wanted the main house furnished with handcrafted furniture from Vancouver Island. Although the furniture wouldn't be ready for a month, the operations department decided to surprise him with an early delivery. Here's the deal. You can't tell anyone, not even his wife. I'm not saying she'll spill the beans, but since she comes for your paycheck, she might say something to the wrong person. The boss and his wife will be there next weekend around the time you get back. Or you'll head to Vancouver, get loaded up, and then return. Is this something you'd be interested in? Before I could respond, she interrupted. Remember, whether you accept or not, you can't tell anyone. Do you promise? I accept and promise not to tell anyone, I said. Good. Since you took it, and because I like you, have you seen that brand new Peterbilt in the yard? He asked. Of course I saw it, I replied. Well, it's yours. Load your things into it. Your cargo is in trailer 2353. You can leave in the morning. Call me when you get to Vancouver and be careful, he instructed. I went home and told Julie about my upcoming trip to the West Coast. She didn't mind the good pay, but we both disliked my nearly 2-week absence. To make up for it, we cherished our night together. Lovemaking with Julie was always special. She was always eager for anything. Early in my trucking days, we took unclothed photos so I could take her with me whenever I drove to Canada. Her photos stayed in a bag on my seat, never checked during the thorough border searches. After the first time, leaving was simple, crossing the border routine with courteous Canadian officials. During the search, Shirley called. The boss's furniture was ready, brought from the island that day. Unloading and loading took hours. Then I headed back east, fully loaded, returning via Detroit. The drive to Montreal took about 9 hours. In Kingston, I parked overnight and called Shirley at 6 a.m. We loaded a barge for the island. The path was straightforward but slow. The forested island led to the guest house where I unexpectedly found my wife with the boss, her bosom being rubbed with what I assumed was sunscreen. As I approached, I realized it was indeed sunscreen, but she wasn't his wife, she was mine. They were caught off guard. I spoke to them briefly, then turned away without hearing their response. Back at the dock, realizing I was on an island, I noticed several boats moored there. Taking a boat was my only way back. With some basic knowledge from TV and movies, I found keys, started a boat, and hurried back to town, damaging it slightly on arrival. The boat drifted away as I left for Kingston Airport, buying a ticket for a flight to New York. Julie had left one message on my ringing phone. "Please call me back," her message read. I called Shirley. "Good morning, Scott. Did you succeed?" she asked. "How long, Shirley?" I demanded. "How long for what?" she replied, confused. "How long has he been sleeping with my wife?" I questioned. "What are you talking about? My God, is she there? Is she all right?" Shirley responded, panicked. "About months. Sorry, Scott. His wife had to be there. Otherwise, I would never have sent you," she admitted. "So you would send me somewhere, knowing the boss was having lovemaking with my wife? Who else knows?" I pressed. "Just Joey and me," she confessed. "Thank you, Shirley, thank you very much," I said sarcastically. "Wait, where are you? What are you going to do?" "Wait, he's on the other line, I'll be right back," she said urgently. "Freak you," I muttered, ending the call. Now I understand why she didn't want me to tell Julie about the trip. She would have told Bradley, ruining the surprise, especially the one he just had. It was a small airport, and I could see everything and everyone coming and going. I kept looking to see if she or he would show up, but they didn't. The flight was short. After landing, I rented a car and drove 4 hours home. She wasn't there. I couldn't stop thinking about what I would do on the drive home. My phone rang again and she left another message. "Scott, if you're home, I'm on my way. Please don't do anything until I arrive, and we can talk. We never had lovemaking, Scott. We just fooled around. Please believe me. They never had lovemaking." Jesus Christ, did she really think I was that stupid? At our apartment, I loaded my pickup truck with everything I wanted, walked over to the terminal, and calmly went to work. Shirley and Joey were there. Neither of them looked at me when they saw it was me. "How much money do you owe me, Shirley?" I demanded. "Scott, she began. "Write me a check for everything the company owes me now," I insisted. "Sorry, Scott, Mr. Bradley said not to give you anything until he talked to you," she explained. "Surely you owe me." "Thank you very much," I replied curtly. "He said you crashed one of his boats," she added. "What else did he say? Was he bragging about sleeping with my wife? Did you all have a good laugh at my expense? Julie came here and told you to keep me off the road as long as possible. Write me a check, Shirley, or I'll wreck this whole damn office," I threatened. It took her a couple of minutes to figure out what I was owed. She called accounting and told them to write me a check. I went to the accounting department. They had everything ready for me. I looked at it. "I changed my mind. Transfer it to my card, please," I requested. "But Scott—" "Direct deposit," they hesitated. "Now please," I insisted. I gave them my card number and they did it. Bradley wouldn't be able to stop the direct deposit payment. Then I went to Bradley's house. One day we had been there on a picnic. My wife was probably there for more than just picnics. Mrs. Bradley opened the door. She looked and acted like she was sick. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "My name is Scott, man, and I used to drive for your husband this morning. I delivered furniture to your island and found your husband massaging my wife's bare bosom with one hand while the other wandered below the waist. I thought you should know. Have a good day," I said. "Wait a minute, mister. What did you say your name was?" she asked. "Man, Scott, man," I replied. "What is your wife's name?" she inquired. "Julie, man," I answered. "Did you see this morning?" she pressed. "With my own eyes," I confirmed. "Are you sure?" she asked again. "Lady, of course I'm sure." "Do you really think I would make something like that up about my own wife?" I retorted. I walked to my truck and drove off, not knowing where I was going. I headed to my parents' house and quickly brought them up to speed. Mom always had coffee ready and offered me a cup. I took it and soon stretched out on the sofa. I closed my eyes. The next thing I remember, I heard my father's voice. "Julie, get off my porch or I'll call the police," he commanded. "But I need to talk to Scott," she pleaded. "After what you did to him?" Dad asked. "No way, but he doesn't understand," she protested. "Oh, I think he understands perfectly. You slept with his boss for 3 months. What's so hard to understand?" Dad responded. "But he doesn't know why," she insisted. "Of course, he knows you're a traitor, that's why. Now get off my porch," he demanded. She started screaming my name. "Scott, talk to me, please. Scott, give me a chance to explain. Scott! Scott!" It had been a long day, and soon I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to my truck. I still didn't know where I was going, but I had to go somewhere. I opened the door to sit down, and Julie was sleeping across the seat. She sat up when she heard the door open. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me back. "Please, Scott, listen to me. I had no choice," she pleaded. "You either let someone have lovemaking with you or you don't, right, Julie?" I asked. "Everything was wrong," she admitted. "So you had lovemaking voluntarily?" I stated, not questioned. "Or Scott, just give me a chance," she begged. "I repeat, you had lovemaking voluntarily," I reiterated. "Okay, I had lovemaking voluntarily, but besides, you lied. We never had lovemaking, we just played around a little," she tried to downplay. God, did you really expect me to believe that? "Get out of my truck," I demanded. She didn't budge, so I took her hand and pulled her outside. Furious, I drove off before she could get up. I went to a fast food restaurant for breakfast. I ordered, took the food to a table, and ate. When I finished, I went to the bank and split our money. My phone rang several times and several people left messages. My former employer, Ernest T. Bradley, left too. "Call me and let's talk, or I'll sue you for crashing my boat, and then you'll go to jail for threatening my employees and don't think I won't do it." That was his first message. "Listen, I slept with your wife, deal with it. This happens every day. She's not the first wife I've spent time with, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride, take her back, and punish her if necessary. That's what she likes and wants. If you don't, maybe I'll keep doing it. Now get back here and drive my truck home, or I'll report you for theft. Plus you owe me 3 more months to pay for your truck driving school." That was his second message. God, what an idiot. So he was still in Canada. I called his wife to see if I could meet her instead of just rushing to his house again. She agreed, and I played his messages for her. She had been sick before, but after hearing him, she felt worse. "At first I wasn't sure I believed you, but now I do. I'm going to make his life hell." "May I have a copy of this message, Mrs. Bradley?" she asked. We made a copy for her. "What are you going to do with your wife?" she inquired. "Divorce, of course. I just don't know how to approach it," I replied. "It's simple," she said. "Find a good lawyer and hire him." It sounded so simple. I left her house and returned to my parents. They also asked what I planned to do. I told them the same thing I told Mrs. Bradley. My father then repeated, word for word, what she had told me. They convinced me, so I started looking for a lawyer. Again, I had no idea where to start, so I began with the letter A in the phone book. I got to D before I found my lawyer, David Dennison, and we hit it off right away. His entire family, including himself, were truck drivers until he flipped his car and was paralyzed from the waist down. He graduated from law school in a wheelchair. He was the only member of his family not in the trucking business, but they all knew and respected Ernest T. Bradley. Dennison noted several times Bradley's youth and business acumen. In fact, everyone who knew him respected him. He was famous in society. He sponsored sports teams, arts programs, and donated to every charity that came his way. Dennison flat out refused to believe me when I first told him what I had discovered in Canada. He was on Bradley's side, and I was almost ready to leave and find another lawyer, but I decided to play the messages for him. He finally began to believe me. "Wow, this will shake up the community if it gets out. How do you want to handle this privately or make a big splash?" Dennis asked. "All I want is to get a divorce as cheaply as possible. From what I understand, this will never make it into the newspapers. The reason for the divorce will be infidelity. If that means it goes all over town, so be it. But there won't be any lies about irreconcilable differences. She cheated, and it will be recorded," I explained. "It can be difficult if that message is all you have. Courts today almost require visual evidence, especially when accusing a man of his stature," Dennis cautioned. "Well, let's try it," I decided. "Fine, we will serve her the documents in the next few days. Do you know where she might be?" he asked. "Either at work at the bakery, at home, or in Canada with him, I guess," I replied. "Of course, we can't serve documents to her in Canada, so we'll try at home or work," he noted. "That works for me. You can contact me by mobile or at my parents'," I said. I was tired of living with my parents, so I spent the next few days looking for my own apartment. I found one that wasn't the fanciest or best in town, but it was mine. A week later, Julie was served at work. My father owned a small welding shop. I never had any interest or inclination towards welding, but that started to change. He convinced me to come work for him just to get me out of my apartment. Both he and my mother thought I spent too much time indoors. I thought about working for another transport company, but I wasn't too enthusiastic about it, so I went to the welding shop. My dad had a pickup truck with portable welding equipment, and basically all he did was fix things. Sometimes a client would ask for something special, and my father would prepare it. Julie tried to talk to me several times, but after she was served, everything went through our lawyers. Our first meeting was about a month after she was served. Her lawyer, of course, tried to get the infidelity charge thrown out. I categorically refused. Bradley was named in the divorce petition, and Julie desperately didn't want his name to appear anywhere near the divorce suit for infidelity. This could ruin his reputation in society, she objected. I exploded. Are you serious? He's a wife-stealing slug and should be exposed to the public, Julie intervened. If you had treated your wife better, he wouldn't have been able to steal her. This led to a quarrel between us, which could only be stopped by placing us in separate rooms. After we cooled down and were back in the same room, she again tried to get me to remove his name. I'm not going to do this, so forget about it. Why are you trying so hard to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Are you still sleeping with him? FYI, he and I are still dating, so yes, I'm still sleeping with him. Her lawyer simply laid his head on the table and groaned, and without lifting it, he spoke. You just admitted to your husband and 2 BFFs that you committed infidelity. This is probably the worst thing you could do at this point. I don't care, she said. Then to me, answering your other question, yes, I'm going to marry him as soon as he gets divorced. So, you think he loves you? I asked. Certainly. I put my phone on the table and scrolled through his message to her. That's not what he said. He's just playing you. Mr. Dennison chuckled as he pulled an envelope from his briefcase and slid it across the table to Julie. Her lawyer intercepted it, opened it, and reviewed the contents, a note and a series of photos. Julie examined the photos first, then read the note aloud. Mr. Mann, these may help with your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island weeks ago with his hairdresser's wife. The next 6 were from last week when I was away. He picked up a woman at a bar. It was just another fling like your wife. The note signed, Cynthia. The photos showed Bradley with the 2 women in various stages of undress or in carnal positions, leaving no doubt about their affair. Julie pushed the photos back and left the room, not to be seen until court, where they split everything, money, jewelry, china, and her clothes. She stayed in their apartment. Bradley's reputation tanked swiftly. His sports teams folded, and Cynthia received half of everything, including their home and half the moving company. He only kept the Canadian island because she didn't want it. He billed my lawyer for truck driving school, claiming breach of contract, met with a colorful response from Mr. Dennison. Cynthia called to disregard it, offering me an operations manager job at a trucking company, tempting, but refused. Over time, I discovered a knack for metalwork thanks to Dad's guidance. Dating came and went, rarely lasting. Bradley's business sold, and Cynthia disappeared. He occasionally surfaced but didn't recognize me from our time together. I found joy welding and crafting metal goods in the shop, like weather vanes and mailbox stands. On a quiet Sunday, Julie visited, seeking conversation. Can we talk? She asked. I have nothing to say, just listen, she explained. I've no excuse. We had a good life, money, love, so why Bradley? Partly his lies about you being away, mistreatment. He said every trucker strays, I believed, surely fed it. Said Bradley treated me well. Mrs. Bradley supposedly has flings to improve marriage, all lies, but I fell for it. Now I know better. I sat quietly and listened. When I thought she had calmed down, I spoke. Why are you telling me all this now? I don't know. I don't think I ever really wanted to tell you this. At least, not the truth. I didn't want you to know how foolish I was. I always thought I'd come up with a story where it was all your fault, and I came up with a few jokes, but I couldn't bring myself to tell you any of them. This afternoon, driving past your store, I saw you here and stopped. I didn't know what I was going to say, just that I had to say something if you'd let me, but what I said turned out to be the truth. What did you hope to gain from this? I asked. Just for you to know that none of this was your fault. These were all my own selfish desires and the fabricated scenarios he created for me. I also wanted you to know that whether you believe it or not, I never stopped loving you, she replied. That's where I think you're lying. I don't think you can truly love someone and lie or cheat on them. You did both. You even wanted to marry him, if I remember correctly. Are you still seeing him? I challenged. I can't explain it any better than I have already, and I won't try to make you believe me. And no, I'm not with him. I haven't seen him since the day in the lawyer's office when I saw those photographs, she responded. She sat silently for a few more moments, watching me work. I guess I should go, she finally said, standing up. Scott. I looked at her. Is there any way I could forgive you enough to give you another chance? She asked. I shook my head. You know where the door is, I replied. After she left, I reflected on my ex-boss and ex-wife, confirming my thoughts about them. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't surprised my boss on the island. Would I still be trucking, settling for what was left? I chose to make weather vanes and take the risk of going broke. One day, a flyer for a Renaissance festival arrived. I'd never heard of it before and learned Maryland claims jousting and lacrosse as official sports. Curious, I attended the festival nearby. There, I saw vendors selling armor, swords, and more. Inspired, I researched and crafted shields and swords, then sold them at festivals across the country. Teddy Wickoff helped me sell my items, marking the start of a new business. I continued making and selling swords and shields, gaining momentum. During this time, I took on a challenging repair job for Mr. James. James damaged his gate. Despite initial doubts, I completed the task with help from his daughter, Hannah, who brought me iced tea and kept me company as we bonded over the project. I developed a keen interest in armor making, pondering its profitability while dating a woman I met at the library. Our relationship ended abruptly. Later, at a cinema, I unexpectedly encountered Hannah with her boyfriend, hearing her voice within minutes of their arrival. "If you touch me there again, I'll cut off your balls." His hand dropped from her shoulder. Irritated, she left, and her boyfriend pleaded for her to return. I followed them. To her credit, she didn't tolerate his behavior. I wasn't close enough to hear, but they were arguing about something. I decided to intervene, something I'd never done before. "Excuse me, Hannah, are you okay?" I asked. She looked at me, taking a moment to recognize me. "No, that guy has more arms than an octopus, and I'm tired of fighting him off. Can you give me a ride home?" "Sure," I agreed. As we headed to my truck, another guy approached. "Hannah, are you okay?" he asked. "Now I am, yes," she replied. "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. Without even looking at me, she said yes, and they headed to his car without saying goodbye to me as if I weren't there at all. I stood there watching them drive off, shook my head, and went home. A few days later, I was at her house again. There were some railings along the walkway that needed attention, so Mr. Jameson asked me to return. Hannah saw me and came over to say hello, but didn't mention the movie incident. I was a bit annoyed at being completely ignored at the cinema and wasn't in the mood to chat. She took the hint and left. I returned the next day with spare parts. It was a standard railing, so parts were readily available. As she headed towards the pool, Hannah stopped to chat. I mostly ignored her. I enjoyed our conversations while working on the gate, but after the theater incident, not so much. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. "Do you remember what happened at the movies last week?" I replied. "You mean with the octopus guy?" she replied. "Yes, I confirmed." "What about it?" she asked. "You asked me to give you a ride home. Do you remember that?" I pressed. "Of course," she answered. "What happened after that?" I inquired. "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and took me home," she said. "And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" I asked. "No, was there?" she responded, confused. "Not if you didn't see anything, I guess," I said, grabbing a hammer and started making noise with the metal, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. It didn't make sense, I thought. "Yeah," she was getting impatient. "I don't get you," she said. I looked her in the eye. "That's the problem," I stated. I resumed hammering. She got the message and left. The rest of the day was spent finishing the railings. My interest in armor grew, and I researched its construction extensively. I crafted my first piece and felt proud of it. I sent a photo to Teddy to get his opinion. "Stick with shields and swords," he advised, laughing. "You're good at that. Our armor requires a lot more work to sell." A few days later, I was at a local bar watching a baseball game when Hannah sat down next to me. "I'm meeting friends for a drink. Want to join us?" she asked. "No thanks, I'm good here," I replied. She got up to leave but hesitated. She looked at me. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to make you mad? If I have to explain it, I feel sorry for you." "Enjoy your drinks," I said. I finished my beer and was about to leave when she returned. "Oh my God, Scott, I didn't mean to ignore you in the theater. That guy made me so angry I didn't know what I was doing. Please accept my apologies," she pleaded. I assumed someone at her table overheard our conversation and corrected her. "Apologies accepted," I said. She smiled. "Will you join us now? Please, let us just have a drink. I owe you at least this," I smiled back. "Sure, thank you." They all drank, and the evening turned out to be enjoyable. Two of them, whose names I don't recall, reminded Hannah of her manners throughout the evening. I felt sympathetic towards her. The group eventually dispersed, and we all departed. I left with Jenny. I sat next to her at the table and inquired about Hannah. She informed me they had been friends for a long time. Look, Scott, I'm not her best friend, but we're close. There's something about you she likes. She regrets how she treated you. She told the whole table that, Jenny explained. She told you have to give her credit for that. Do you have her number? I asked. No, Jenny replied. Give me your phone, I said. I handed it over and she entered Hannah's number. Give her a call, she suggested. The following week, one morning at the store, Hannah walked in. I assumed she got the address from her father. Did you have fun last time? I enjoyed it. I like your friends, I said. That's good, but what about me? Do you like me? I remember you apologized, she replied. I remember, I acknowledged. Then why aren't we friends? She asked. I smiled. I think we're working on it. An apology doesn't automatically mean friendship. It means you realize you made a mistake and regret it. That's why you apologize. The person may or may not accept it. I accepted yours, but that doesn't mean we'll be best friends. It just means I acknowledge you understand what you did and feel sorry for it, assuming your apology was sincere. It was, she assured. I believe you, I said. Good, so let's go out to dinner, she proposed. I chuckled. Why not? It'll be a good step in building our friendship, she added. All right, when? I asked. How about tonight? She suggested. And so it was. Hannah and I had dinner, and our friendship blossomed. We dated for 2 months before becoming physical, engaged, but that was just the beginning. Our relationship thrived, and soon we wanted to spend all our time together. She'd visit the store just to be with me, and we both cherished that time. I could work while she read, and we didn't always need to talk or interact. Just being there for each other was enough. During a late-night conversation in bed, I learned she'd been married briefly. However, she surprised me by revealing Jonah Jameson wasn't her biological father. She and her mother were married for only 7 years. She had an older brother, and their father passed away 2 years after their mother married Jameson. Their father owned a trucking company, and her brother Ernest wanted to take over and manage it. He was 6 years older than Hannah, and many doubted his youthfulness. However, Hannah and her mother agreed to let him try. He proved capable, and the company prospered. I got out of bed, poured us drinks, and returned. Tell me about your brother, I asked. I've told you most of it, the important parts anyway. The gist is, the transport company was doing well, so well. He and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. Then some woman got her hooks into him, and he ended up divorced, selling the company. Supposedly, this woman's husband started driving for him, thinking they could make money together. She wriggled her way in and seduced him. They set it up so her husband would catch them together on the island. My sister-in-law divorced my brother, took half the company, and they had to sell. What a pair of thieves! I downed my drink in one go. How much did they extort from him? I asked. My brother never told me, but they got something, she replied. Do you remember their names? I inquired. I did, but I forgot, she answered. I decided to be honest with her, though I feared it would end our relationship. So I opted for one last physical encounter. Afterward, I almost convinced myself not to reveal my identity because the lovemaking had been unparalleled. Knowing the truth would likely spell the end for us, especially since I was preparing to leave her house. I dressed, sat on the edge of her bed, and began. The time has come. Let's revisit the story of your brother's divorce. Was what you told me the official version or his perspective? I asked. He told me, so I took it as official. Why do you ask? She replied. Because everything happened completely differently, I said. What do you mean? She asked. So I recounted the true events. Halfway through, she abruptly got out of bed, still unclothed, and listened intently. In conclusion, I asserted that Julie and I had merely ended in divorce, not extortion. Her response was curt, "You're lying, get out." "I'm not lying, this is the truth," I insisted. She hurled a pillow at me. "You're lying, get out, and don't return with these lies." I departed, disliking such endings yet cherishing the memory of our final closeness. Life moved on. I experienced another social lull, unable to find a way out of my rut. One evening, feeling indulgent, I dined at a posh restaurant. After finishing my main course, I scanned the room and spotted Hannah and her brother a few tables away, with a small cake adorned with candles. I signaled for the bill, paid it, then boldly approached their table and sat down. They regarded me like an alien. Her brother spoke first. "Are you sure you're at the right table?" he asked, clearly not recognizing me. "Indeed, and I think it's time you told your sister the truth about your divorce." "She knows about it," I said. "Who the hell are you?" he retorted. "But evidently she doesn't know the real truth, so you need to set the record straight," I said firmly. "Or freak you," he shot back. "Scott, what are you doing?" She nearly shouted, "Get out of here." Miraculously, the waiter appeared. "Is everything all right here?" he inquired. "This guy," Hannah said, pointing at me, "sat down uninvited and maltreated my brother. I want him to leave." "Certainly, sir, I must ask you to depart," the waiter insisted. I faced Bradley first. "You're something else," I said. "Just go," Hannah demanded. Leaving, I figured it might be our final meeting. Back in my shop, I focused on my favorite projects, axes and chainmail. The next weekend, a festival awaited, where I brought shields, axes, and chainmail samples for Teddy. He got me a vendor pass and introduced me to Diana, dressed in period attire with a revealing gown. "Diana, meet Scott." "Scott, Diana," Teddy said. "Scott crafts our pieces, and he's got some new ones today." "That's what I do," I said, fetching the new items from my truck. Teddy and Diana admired them like treasures. Amid the bustling festival, we shared a meal and enjoyed the lively atmosphere. I wanted to ask about Diana, but the chance never came. Teddy later explained she and her sister organized festivals nationwide. "If you hadn't shown up, she would have." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I would have found a motel," I replied. "No chance, they're all booked," he said. The next day, Diana was a hit, and we had a profitable weekend selling out our stock. After the festival, Teddy convinced me to stay another night before heading home. I rushed to craft chainmail. Upon returning, barely sleeping all weekend, around 3 a.m., Hannah appeared at my door, intoxicated and with police in tow. "Are you Scott, man?" one officer asked. "Yes," I replied. "Is she your girlfriend?" he inquired. "I know her, but she's not my girlfriend," I clarified. "Are you sure?" "She insists you're her boyfriend," he pressed. "Not even close." "Last time I saw her, she called me a liar and kicked me out of her house," I explained. "We're taking her with us," he said. "Where are you taking her?" I asked. "To spend the night at the station," he replied. "No, don't do that. I'll take care of her," I offered. "Are you sure?" he questioned. "No, but I can't let her spend the night at the station," I affirmed. I helped her inside and settled her on my bed, the only one available. I considered sleeping on the couch, which was preferable to the air mattress in Teddy's tent, but I preferred my own bed. Instead, there was a snoring, drunk woman in it. The next morning, I woke up and went to work. I heard nothing from her all day and expected her to still be asleep when I returned home. I was wrong. She was gone, and the apartment was spotless. I searched for a note but found nothing. Despite my efforts, I didn't manage to complete a single new piece of chainmail. Teddy stopped by and picked up shields, swords, and axes I had stashed. We debated hiring help, but qualified metal workers were scarce. We decided on training instead, placing ads in the local newspaper and the festival newsletter. On a Friday evening, I was in the workshop working on inventing a machine to speed up chainmail production. There were a few available on the market, but I believed I could improve upon them. It was late, and I was tired when there was a knock on the door. It was a sober-looking Hannah. "Thank you for rescuing me from the police," she said. I nodded. "I tried to clean up after her. Everything's okay," she nodded back at a loss for words. As we stood there in silence, "Listen, it's been a long day, and I need to get some sleep," I said. I gently moved past her, closed and locked the door, then headed to my car. "Good night," I said. As I was about to get into the car, I heard her voice. "You were right, my brother lied." "I'm sorry," she admitted. I simply waved over my shoulder, got into the car, and drove home. Armor making fascinated me. After Teddy critiqued my initial attempt, I conducted extensive research and created another suit that served as a template for future pieces. They were labor-intensive, time-consuming, and incredibly challenging, but I relished the challenge. Feeling prepared, I debuted it at the next festival, where Teddy was impressed. While we could have sold it several times over, we chose to showcase it as a sample of my craftsmanship. Visitors admired it, commented, and if interested in purchasing, we discussed customization options. My festival ventures were prosperous and fulfilling. I purchased a trailer to transport my tools and materials, enabling me to move between festivals. Sometimes I worked at a booth, engaging with visitors, while other times I crafted in the private vendor area. One evening between festivals, I conversed with my father and marveled at the unexpected success of Renaissance metalwork. Who would have known so many people were interested in armor and could afford it? These items weren't cheap, I remarked. After the festival season ended, I began dating a girl I met at our local car dealership. I was considering buying a new truck since my dad's welding truck was old. The plan was to outfit my new truck with welding equipment, sell the old one, and possibly upgrade to something newer and bigger. While she was getting her car serviced, I admired a new truck outside the showroom. We struck up a conversation and ended up exchanging phone numbers. A week later, we went on our first date, followed by a second, and so on. One evening, after I drove her home, she invited me inside. We had a second drink, and I sat on her sofa. She stood in front of me and started unbuttoning her blouse. "Do you mind if I get more comfortable?" she asked. "Not at all, as long as I get to watch and enjoy," I replied. She grinned. "That's the whole idea. I undress while you watch, then you undress while I watch, then we have lovemaking, hoping it won't end too quickly. It seems like you've planned everything out." "Oh, absolutely." As her blouse came off and her skirt was about to follow, I reached for her underwear, but she gently pushed my hands away. "Let me handle this. Just watch and enjoy. You do like watching a lady undress, don't you?" "I'm not sure. I've never really paid attention before," I admitted. She let out a deep, throaty laugh. "I hope you're better in bed than you are at lying." Her bra joined her blouse on the floor. "You're pretty confident, aren't you?" "Very," she said. "Now it's your turn." I began unbuttoning my shirt. "Slow down, Tiger. We have all night. Let me enjoy the show." I slowed down and she licked her lips. I kicked off my shoes, unbuckled my belt, and unzipped my trousers. As I started to pull my pants down, she placed her hands over mine and knelt down, following my pants to the floor. She stopped when she was on her knees, looking up at me. "What's next, t-shirt or shorts?" she asked. "Which do you prefer?" "The t-shirt. Save the best for last." I removed my t-shirt and tossed it aside. She picked it up and brought it to her nose. I love the scent of men," she murmured. I left around 3 in the morning. The whole drive home, I compared her to Hannah and the last time we had lovemaking, unable to decide who was better. The relationship lasted a solid 4 months before we broke up. Later that evening, I noticed several missed calls and messages from Hannah. "Scott, please call me as soon as you get this message. It doesn't matter what time it is, please," her message read. I took her at her word and dialed. She answered after 2 rings. "Hello, Scott," she said. Her voice sounded slightly slurred. "I woke you up, I think. I dozed off. I tried to stay awake waiting for your call." "All right, I'm calling. What's so urgent?" I asked. "I wanted you to know my brother lied about his divorce. You were right, and I'm sorry." "You've already apologized for that. Is there something else?" I inquired. "Yes." There was a pause. "Can we see each other again? I miss you," she confessed honestly. "There's no way you and I can see each other knowing who your brother is and what he did with my wife. If we got serious, it would inevitably cause problems with him, and I'd always feel uncomfortable. I'm not putting myself through that." I could hear her crying. "I knew you'd say that, but I hoped you wouldn't. Goodbye, Scott." The Renaissance festivals were back in full swing. I secured my passes, bought a tent and camping gear, and hit the road. I spent most of my time assisting Teddy at his booth. When not doing that, I worked on creating new items for sale. My armor-making skills had improved significantly during the off-season, and at each festival we sold at least 1 piece. While demand was high, each piece required a substantial amount of time to craft. 2 days after closing one festival, Teddy asked if I could join him at the next one. I agreed, and since he was nearby, he brought his trailer with everything I needed. I loaded up my truck and left my trailer at home, taking his instead. I worked 3 festivals in a row, garnering attention from visitors. I even demonstrated my chainmail machine. By the 3rd festival, the next event on my schedule was near Philadelphia and spanned 11 days, making it one of the largest in the country. Unlike others, which ran Thursday to Sunday, this one started on a Thursday, continued through the following weekend, and ended the weekend after. I spent 2 weeks at home preparing materials, primarily focusing on armor. My father became adept at crafting shields, axes, and swords. I worked late into the night. One evening, late into the night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a very intoxicated Hannah stumbling into my arms. "Is this your girlfriend?" one of the 2 police officers accompanying her asked. "If it keeps her out of trouble tonight, I guess so." I half-guided, half-carried her to my bedroom and simply dropped her on the bed. I showered, shaved, changed into pajamas, and set out clothes for the next day, anticipating the possibility of her returning in a similar state. The next morning, I checked on Hannah, still asleep. I debated whether to stay and attempt a conversation or simply let it go. That evening, I went to work. Upon returning home, I found the house immaculate. She had even cleaned the kitchen. In the bathroom, my toothbrush and toothpaste were in different places, so I rearranged them. Both were wet, as was the washcloth on the sink. I took a frozen enchilada from the freezer and heated it up for dinner, though I didn't eat much. The following morning, I departed for the festival in Philadelphia, bringing along all my materials for shields and chainmail. My plan was to conduct numerous demonstrations. The first day was incredible, and it only improved from there on. That initial Sunday, a large crowd watched me nearly all day long. By the time the festival closed for the day, Teddy and I were both exhausted. Evenings in the vendor area were always lively, serving as the epicenter of the party scene. There, people cooked, played music, drank, rehearsed sword fights, repaired or tried on armor, tended to horses, and engaged in physical activities. It wasn't uncommon to stroll past a tent and hear sounds of closeness, or see a camper or van gently swaying. After things quieted down, I sat outside my tent and thought how nice it would be to have someone inside to cuddle with. Hannah was probably free, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. Monday's crowds were moderate, but foot traffic remained steady throughout the day. Attendance records weren't broken, but it was bustling enough. In the middle of the day, while demonstrating the painstaking process of assembling chainmail, I glanced up and saw Hannah watching me. I continued my demo, inviting questions from onlookers. None were posed, and the crowd eventually dispersed, leaving Hannah standing there. "Do you enjoy doing this?" she asked. "Yes, I do," I replied. "You're good at it," she said. With that, she turned and melted into the crowd. I didn't see her again until the end of the event on Wednesday. My parents arrived with more shields and axes. I showed them around, though they didn't seem entirely pleased with what I was doing. I pointed out where the vendors were set up, particularly to my mother, who disapproved of my tent setup. The remainder of the week and the weekend were successful, leaving Teddy and me satisfied. Upon returning home, I took a day off, during which my father helped me with chainmail work in the shop. As I discussed plans for a larger motorhome and trailer, the door opened and Hannah walked in. "This festival was a blast. A few friends and I are heading to the next one nearby," she said. "We even talked about going in armor." "Sounds like fun," I replied vaguely. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Probably," I answered. My father and I kept working, not making eye contact with her. "Can I come with you?" she inquired. "Not very practical since I'll be there from Wednesday to Sunday," I said. "No worries, we can get a motel room," she suggested. "Highly unlikely. Those book up months in advance," I explained. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "In a tent," I replied. "That sounds cozy. Maybe we could share," she proposed. "It's a small tent," I said. "Small ones can be cozy," she said. My father glanced at me, grinned, and excused himself. "Listen," she said, "you'll never forget that my brother had an affair with your wife, so we can't have a serious relationship, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends with benefits, right? We enjoy lovemaking together, don't we?" I hesitated. "So why not use each other? You can date whoever you want, but if you're not getting any action, I can help. What do you say?" I looked at her. "You're amazing, and I've said it before, but the idea of sharing doesn't sit well with me. I can't just have lovemaking with you knowing you might leave for someone else, even if you haven't yet. We both deserve to find real relationships and respect them." She stepped closer, touched my face, and kissed me. "You don't get it. I'm already in a relationship. If you want to date others, go ahead. Just know I'll always be there for whatever you need, whenever you need it. I don't need anyone else. I love you, and I fully intend to honor this arrangement." She kissed me once more and departed. My father must have watched her leave. "What are you going to do about her?" he asked. I kept staring at the door through which she had just exited. "I honestly don't know, Dad." "What do you think?" "You've got two choices," he began. "Either come to terms with the fact that her brother had an affair with your ex-wife and accept that she may stick around, or leave town and keep a low profile. Maybe it's time to consider what your mother and I discussed." "What's that?" "We'll talk about it when we get home." At the dinner table later, he filled my mother in on Hannah. "So I thought maybe it's time we gave Scott that gift we talked about." "I think you might be right," she said. "What gift are you talking about?" I asked. "I don't like the idea of you sleeping in a tent," my mother said. "We're going to buy you a motorhome," my father announced. Arguing with them seemed pointless, and I actually thought it was a good idea. It took a week to find exactly what I wanted. Since I already had a Class A CDL, I didn't need driving lessons. So I hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to tow behind it. I set up the trailer so I could work inside if needed and connected power from the van to the trailer. It was an excellent setup. I focused on crafting armor while my father worked on shields, swords, and axes. We both found immense satisfaction in this type of work. Teddy became envious when he saw my trailer and asked if I had christened it yet. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Have you had lovemaking in it yet?" He clarified. "No," I replied. He grinned. "Do you mind if Diana and I?" I chuckled. "Go right ahead." He texted her and she arrived in 10 minutes. He took her hand and off they went. They held hands and laughed when they returned. "We wanted you to be the first to know," he said. "Diana and I are getting married." She hugged me. "It was your van that clinched it," she said. "Thank you." That weekend, I didn't see much of any of them, but my van smelled like perfume and more. Back home for a week, Hannah spotted the van and dropped by. I'd been in a dry spell and knew I could get her into bed, so I gave her a tour and she was suitably impressed. "This is much better than a tent," she remarked. "Yes, indeed," I agreed. "It's got a double bed, doesn't it?" she asked. "Yes, and a sizable closet. And I bet this shower can fit too," she asked. "It probably can," I said. We were in the van's living area when she approached me. "Has it been christened yet?" she coyly inquired. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Has anyone had lovemaking in it yet?" I fibbed. "No, it's brand new."
"Well," she almost whispered, "we could do it now or this weekend."
Since we were in my parents' yard, now wasn't feasible. "What do you mean this weekend?" I asked. "After the festival ends each evening," she suggested. "We could then." "Sorry, this is Southern Virginia. Even if I said yes, it's too far a drive for you." "You're right," she conceded, "so I'll just come with you." "Did you not hear what I just said?" She started tugging at my shirt, pulling me closer. "Scott, you admitted I'm the best you've ever had, and you're the best I've ever had. Plus, I'm in love with you. And I know you like me more than just a little. We should just have lovemaking whenever we can. Also, I have a dress that would be perfect for the festival. Everyone will love it. Especially you." She kissed me softly and tenderly, as if she were in love with me. "I'm leaving here at 5 in the morning on Tuesday. I won't wait for you," I meekly stated. She kissed me again. "You don't have to." And she was right. She unpacked her clothes, stocked the kitchen, and by midnight Monday she was in the van's bed. As soon as I got behind the wheel Tuesday morning, she came and sat in the passenger seat, wearing only a robe. I knew because she glared at me every time I glanced her way. She met Diana, and both wore low-cut dresses that accentuated their curves. I couldn't wait for the workday to end. At closing time, Teddy and I shut down the booth. Hannah and Diana were cooking dinner in the van upon our arrival. I'd never tasted Hannah's cooking, but it was delicious. After Teddy and Diana left, Hannah asked if I wanted to shower with her. There was enough space for two, and from there, we moved to the bed. That night marked the beginning of many nights and days spent enjoying each other in that van. This was also 3 years ago. Initially, her family tried to convince her that I only let her travel with me despite her brother. He had convinced them that Julie and I were the cause of his divorce, not him. Obviously, none of them had been in court to see the truth, and, like Hannah, they believed him. Hannah provided them copies of my divorce decree and her ex-sister-in-law's statements. He stayed in town and was responsible for a couple more divorces before deciding that the other side of the country would be better for his health. Hannah now has several new dresses for festivals. They don't highlight her belly as much. She never said she wanted to be a wife before becoming a mother, but I know it's on her mind. It's on my mind, too.
He likely would have attempted compromise or talked me out of it. Sometimes drastic measures are necessary to capture someone's attention. It felt like one of those do unto others before they do unto you moments in life. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. CJ intensified his focus on my unconscious friend as if urging me on. The rumble of trucks could be heard from behind the house, probably a neighbor's furniture delivery. I dialed a number I'd grown all too familiar with over the years. It rang once and connected midway through the second ring. It seemed almost too coincidental, as if he anticipated my call. "Mark?" I asked cautiously. "Who else would answer?" he replied. His casual response softened my self-reproach slightly. "Why are you calling me?" he questioned. He spoke as if it were strange or unexpected for me to call. Upon reflection, I realized he was right. I hadn't called him in years, except when I needed something for myself. This man had worked tirelessly to provide for us, while I had largely ignored him. Perhaps what I wanted would benefit us both. Maybe I could let him keep a little more money. I didn't need to hurt him, I just needed to be free. "I'm your wife," I reminded him. I was on the brink of liberation, feeling the intensity build as I neared the finish line. I could feel sweat dripping onto Shannon beneath me. She responded with a high-pitched sound, pulling me closer and sealing our lips in a passionate kiss. Her grip tightened around me. I let out a breath, trying to regain my composure. Shannon giggled and kissed me again. The temptation was strong. "Shannon, darling, I can't resist," I managed to choke out. She whispered back, "You'll have to wait a little longer, sweetheart. It'll be much better if you do." Every word from her was drawing me closer to the edge. "Oh my God, drive me wild, baby," I said, struggling to maintain control. Shannon had this incredible ability to push me to the edge, leaving me always wanting more. It was hard to believe it had only been 3 months since I met her. Just as I felt like I was about to lose myself, my phone rang, breaking the spell. I glanced down to see Shannon clearly enjoying herself. Her eyes rolled back, legs trembling. "Ooh, baby, that feels amazing," she murmured. I tried to refocus. "What are you doing to me, Shannon?" I asked, annoyed at the interruption. "I'm trying to make you happy, Mark," she said slyly. I couldn't help but confess. "I've been happy since I met you," I told her. She grinned. "You'll be even happier when we're finished." Answering the call, hoping it might be important, I reached for the phone, but it wasn't what I expected. It was the movers. I had completely forgotten they were supposed to call upon arrival. Shannon, undeterred, resumed her playful actions, reigniting my excitement. Just as I was getting back into the moment, my phone rang again. I recognized the number and nodded to Shannon. She looked at me with a mix of amusement and a mischievous grin. After the call, Shannon rolled over and nestled beside me. I couldn't help but admire her physique. Her toned legs, heart-shaped derriere, and slender waist were mesmerizing. It was as if she were a work of art, perfectly sculpted. I chuckled at her jest about God, focusing more on her posterior than her chest. I was in love again. Yes, again, only for the second time, but this time everything felt right. This love was akin to a phoenix rising from the ashes of my past. Perhaps I should begin from the start. 3 months ago, I was a fool in love, enamored with a woman who despised me, and deep down, we both knew it. Yet I loved her genuinely. Naively, I believed she loved me in return. Admittedly, my marriage had its troubles. We argued incessantly, but I thought it was a phase all couples endured. My awakening came when my secretary announced a visitor. Shannon entered my office and took a seat, confusion clouding my mind. "Which company are you representing?" I inquired. "I'm part of the you and me out to avenge the idiocy of the corporation," she retorted. "I'm lost," I confessed. "You're about to be, Mark, and it won't be gentle," she warned, with a shrug of her petite shoulders. She continued, "Your wife is cheating on you." Initially, I thought I misheard, but her certainty left no room for doubt. She stated it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the color of the sky. Deep down, I sensed she spoke the truth. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Sweat dotted my brow, my heart raced, and tears threatened to spill. Imagery of Anne with an unidentified man lost in ecstasy flooded my mind. Then the floodgates opened, and tears streamed down my face. Ashamed of my vulnerability, I buried my head, refusing to let this petite redhead witness my anguish. Suddenly, I was enveloped in the scent of cherries. Warm hands lifted my head, offering solace and tenderness. "I'm so sorry," she murmured gently. "I never saw this coming. I suppose I expected you to react like I did when I found out. I thought you'd get angry and want to confront my boyfriend." Perched on my desk, she cradled my head in her lap, stroking it in an effort to soothe me. "You love her, don't you?" She shook her head. "Even though she cheats on you and never speaks well of you, do you truly love her? When they're together, all she does is criticize and dictate. I don't understand. You try so hard to support her, yet she fails to appreciate you or your efforts. Why do you care so much about her?" She continued to stroke my head, her voice calming, and I wondered if she aimed to pacify me or if she was simply thinking aloud. "Is it because of her blonde hair and ample chest?" she questioned. "CJ has a thing for blondes with big chests too. I expected more from you." Suddenly I met her gaze. "I don't know why I'm so furious with her. I loved her before she dyed her hair," I retorted, "and I'm the one who paid for those chests." Her response was a burst of laughter, so melodious it caught me off guard. "What's amusing?" I inquired. I'm just speaking the truth. I know, dear, she replied, but my dense ex has no clue that his dream woman is mostly artificial. It likely cost you a fortune to make her look that way. I shook my head, feeling as though I were in a haze. Yet my anger persisted. Shannon divulged everything, how they met and Anne's ulterior motives. They strategized, believing they'd found the best way to remove me from Anne's life while securing most of my assets. Shannon found herself in a similar, albeit less lawful situation. She'd supported CJ from the start, even as he indulged in affairs with women at the bar where he worked part-time, all the while yearning for his ideal blonde with ample curves whom he found in Anne. Beyond the physical enhancements I financed, Anne also seemed to fulfill a maternal role for him. Shannon hired a private investigator to gather intel on CJ. I conversed with her agent, Sarah Price, multiple times before agreeing to her terms. It wasn't particularly challenging. However, this information proved futile for Shannon. Sarah, another striking redhead, reiterated this to Shannon numerous times. Since Shannon and CJ weren't married, the information held no weight for her. CJ could easily leave Shannon without repercussion. Conversely, I could utilize Sarah's findings and recordings to bolster my stance in the divorce proceedings and potentially lessen the financial settlement with Anne and her paramour. Over the weeks of observation and strategizing, Shannon and I grew closer. One evening, it all culminated in a conversation. "Shannon, you deserve better than him," I asserted. "Why don't you just leave?" She suggested. "Forget about him." "But I can't leave without repercussions. I don't let anyone walk all over me," I explained. "But haven't you already gained the upper hand by uncovering his schemes? You're not emotionally tied to him like I was, so you're not trapped, right?" I reasoned. "You're young and stunning. There's still time for you to find someone who will treat you right." Even in the dim interior of my Mustang, her green eyes sparkled. "So you finally noticed, huh?" she teased. "Noticed what?" I inquired. She grinned. "I noticed you from the moment you walked into my office." I confessed. "Rubbish," she chuckled. "You were so infatuated with Anne that you didn't even register that I was a woman, let alone possibly interested in you." Her laughter, as always, enchanted me. It was one of the things I adored most about her. "Why do you think I'm still here?" she choked up. "I ended things with CJ and any desire for retribution weeks ago. Helping you get even means much more to me than seeking revenge on that fool. I just can't stand the idea of you being financially burdened by those two con artists for the rest of their lives. There has to be a way for us to break free from this, darling." She drew close to me, embraced me, and kissed me for the first time. I was taken aback, yet I relished it too much to entertain the notion of not kissing her back. At 40, after 2 decades of marriage, I thought I knew how to kiss, but my experience was solely with Anne. Kissing Shannon was an entirely different sensation. The taste, the feeling, it was all distinct. I couldn't get enough. We lost track of time, forgetting about the tape recording of our cheating partners. Eventually, a voice interrupted us, but Shannon refused to let go of my hand. I suspected as much. "All right. I was hoping this would happen," Sarah remarked with a smile. "You two are adorable together. You're much better suited for each other than your current partners. Now that you're a couple, we can let those schemers go. They'll get their comeuppance eventually." "But what about the divorce and our retaliation?" Shannon inquired. Sarah surprised us by explaining some legal matters. "The question is, are you both committed enough to pursue this?" Sarah asked. "Take some time to consider. This is a significant decision. I'll send you the bill," she smiled. The subsequent weeks were dedicated to crafting our narrative. Shannon and I honed our acting abilities. We both informed our partners about our supposed hectic work schedules, and it's astonishing that they bought into it. Neither of them had any inkling that Shannon and I were acquainted, let alone involved romantically. This afforded us the chance to spend more time together, nurturing our mutual attraction until it blossomed into full-fledged love. One day, I phoned Shannon at her workplace and declared that I was ready. "I feel like I need to be with you more," I confessed. "We're practically inseparable every night, you silly," she giggled through the receiver. "That's not enough," I insisted. "But we haven't even been carnal yet," she whispered, indicating that she was cautious of being overheard at work. "I'm certain lovemaking with you will be incredible," I reassured her. "You have no idea," she purred. "But you do realize I don't have the same assets as your wife," she pointed out. "What does that matter?" I countered. "What truly makes lovemaking amazing is being with someone you love and genuinely want to please." Then she said it, tears brimming in her eyes, her voice quivering. It was as if she had been waiting for me to reciprocate. "I love you too, Mark, and I promise it'll always be this way. You can have every part of me, whenever you want. I'm yours," she poured out. I was taken aback. No one, not even Anne in our youth, had ever expressed their love for me so eloquently and passionately. And no, I've never said anything like that to anyone before you, she declared solemnly. Not even that idiot CJ. I never doubted it, I responded. I'm just curious about how soon we can proceed. We're following Sarah's plan. The call this morning was precisely what we were waiting for. The ironic aspect of all this was my sincere belief that fate played a hand in bringing us together. While we meticulously planned, we took great care not to be seen together for weeks, yet acquaintances of ours kept approaching each of us, divulging suspicions about our significant other's infidelity. We had to feign ignorance, which bordered on a comedic farce akin to Shakespearean proportions. It seemed that only CJ and Anne suspected that we were aware, presuming their superiority over everyone else. Finally, my Fox business trip arrived. It was a ruse, but it served its purpose. Fortunately, Shannon's mother conveniently fell ill around the same time. The illusion of both of us being out of town emboldened the swindlers, leading to that pivotal phone call. Things didn't unfold as smoothly as we anticipated. Both Shannon and I had anticipated the call to come on Friday night. That's why I scheduled the truck to arrive on Sunday morning. I wanted to give the lovebirds a couple of days to relish each other's company before everything unraveled. Nevertheless, Shannon and I relished the moment of triumph as I answered the call. I addressed the voice of the woman I had been married to for over 20 years. Who else can answer my phone? I replied gleefully. Shannon approached and embraced me, lending me a strength I never knew I possessed. Why on earth are you calling me? I demanded. I'm your wife, she replied. Mark dear, I need to tell you something and you probably won't like it. I think the simplest way to do this is to inform you that in the long run, it will benefit both of us. It may not seem like it now, but I just burst out laughing, and he laughed too. I couldn't believe he was laughing at me. CJ went downstairs to see what was happening with the damn trucks. I wish CJ had been by my side. So why the hell are you laughing? I queried. I'm being serious. Well, the other day someone was talking to me and said, "You'll leave me in the lurch," he said, still in that same chuckling tone. He really knew how to get under my skin. Well, in a moment he'll be laughing out of the other side of his mouth, and that's what it's all about. This time I was determined to outsmart him. But let me tell you, I have some news for you, he continued, and you'll soon find out what it is. Then you'll have to dine alone. What on earth are you talking about? I questioned. I don't think it was your idea at all, he chuckled. I think this is CJ's scheme. Hell, he knew about me and CJ. He mentioned overhearing some people talking about it, probably my nosy neighbors. I had to try to salvage the situation. No, to hell with it all. I had to follow through with it. Mark, I'm leaving you, I declared. I want a divorce. I put as much conviction into my voice as I could muster, but all he did was laugh even harder. Your letter to me gave me pause and made me wonder why, but I think you felt compelled to set things right, he chuckled. His words sent a shiver down my spine. Was this idiot psychic? Nobody knew about that blasted letter. Even CJ had no clue that I had penned a letter to Mark. The letter was supposed to accompany the divorce papers, detailing my sentiments about our marriage and where we went wrong. It also outlined precisely what Mark needed to do to win me back from CJ. Mark, we need to discuss this, I muttered. I think we should do it when you get home. Just remember this, my girl. When you look at the sky, he crooned, you can see the stars and still not see the light. Mark, are you eating? I exclaimed in disbelief. I called the idiot to inform him we were finished, and he was singing. He feigned delight at my departure to rattle me. Mark, if you don't make changes, we're headed for divorce, I warned. It's too late for that, honey. Oh, how painful it is, he replied. And in the background I heard a woman's voice murmuring something about being the only woman he'd better call Sweet Mark. It's never too late, I countered. Why is it too late, Mark, and who is that woman next to you? Because I've already left, he warbled, and I feel stronger and I sing this victory song. Ooh, oh my God, ooh. What the hell do you mean you already left? I yelled into the phone. Suddenly the dread I had been feeling all morning intensified. It was akin to how Wile E. Coyote feels just before the boulder he dropped on the Roadrunner starts looming over his own head. I strained to hear Mark's response, but all I heard was beeping. I flung the phone onto the bed beside me just as CJ burst into the room. The fear etched on his face was palpable. You need to get dressed and go downstairs, he instructed. I hastily threw on a robe and cinched it tightly. In the living room stood a formidable black woman holding a tablet, looking as though she owned the place. Who the hell are you? I demanded. Get out of my house. She regarded me with a measured gaze, then turned her back. I'm feeling generous, she declared. I understand your situation may evoke anger and resentment, but I won't tolerate rudeness or any delays. I need to vacate this house by day's end, and I aim to do so charitably. You have a few minutes to gather your personal belongings. I'm not budging, I retorted. This house belongs to me and my husband. It's nearly paid off. CJ, call the police. Yes, he did, she confirmed. CJ called the police. That'll expedite matters. This house isn't nearly paid off, it's fully paid. This is likely to be the most humiliating moment of your life, ma'am. I stared at her as CJ dialed emergency. A few moments, which felt like an eternity, passed, granting me a chance to ponder. Then Mark's words echoed in my mind. What was that supposed victory song? What victory was he declaring? And then Hank K., the police chief and a personal friend of Mark and me, arrived. The woman strode past me, handing Hank a stack of papers. He perused them, nodding several times before approaching me. He glanced past me to CJ. Is this him? He inquired. Who? I repeated, bewildered. Don't be vexed, he said. I'm just curious if this is the man you cheated on Mark with. It's audacious to have him here in Mark's house. Darn it. I forgot Mark sold the house. Before I could process his words, my mind went into overdrive. A rather cheerful woman pushed through the moving crew. Is he? She inquired. She sauntered around CJ and then flashed a smile at me. They said you were naive, but I had to see for myself. What on earth are you talking about? I demanded. Half the women in town are wondering why you swapped your husband for a guy with less manhood in his pants and no income, she grinned. There might be some truth to the idea that silicone in your chest rots your brain. Follow my train of thought, Tina, the police chief interjected. He approached CJ slowly and quizzed. Hey buddy, do you know what a woman says to a guy with a really big male organ? No, I don't, CJ replied, looking bewildered. How would you? The chief retorted, and he and the plump woman erupted into laughter. Can we proceed? The black woman asked, wiping tears of mirth. Sure, the chief consented. Pack your things and leave. Mark sold the house. But he can't, I protested. This is my home. I chose it, even though he paid for it, the chief intervened. He purchased it with his own funds. His name is the sole one on the deed. He can do as he pleases. Nonsense. A woman always gets the house in a divorce, I shouted. Not always, the chief countered. Moreover, you two aren't divorcing. Indeed, that's correct, I acknowledged. I intend to file tomorrow. You should have done it last week, as that's when he sold the house, the chief remarked, chuckling. Is this legal? I inquired. No, the chief replied. It's a bit sneaky, much like sleeping with some pervert while your husband is toiling away at work to buy you all those luxuries, but it's entirely lawful. Darn, I muttered. CJ, contact my lawyer. I need to reach out to the bank and our investment firm, I instructed. Do it outside, the black woman directed, waving her hand as her team began removing furniture from the house. Where are they taking my furniture? I demanded. Your husband donated the furniture to a local charity auction house, she explained. You can always repurchase it. I handpicked every piece of this furniture, arranged it, and paid for it. Maybe you should have chipped in, Tina chuckled. Oh, I forgot. What? Does hair bleach mess with your brain? I brushed off her remark and dialed the bank. Carly, it's Ann Clayton. Yes, Mark's wife. Carly, my lawyer will contact you soon to freeze our accounts, so I need to withdraw the money beforehand, I explained to Carly's overly cheery voice on the line. Carly, first things first, I continued. Let Len handle this. I'll need enough funds to maintain the house and cover expenses for a while. Also, during the freeze, will only the current account funds be locked, or can Mark reroute his direct deposit? Just the current account funds, she clarified. But I believe he switched his direct deposit. Last week when he left his job. What did he do? I gasped. Oh crap, Carly, I want to empty all our accounts and transfer them to a new one. All right, are you certain about withdrawing everything? She inquired. Damn right, I affirmed. Mark will land another job quicker than Tina devours a bucket of chicken wings, but this money is all I have until the divorce is finalized. I'll need to issue you a check for that amount. Then you'll need to deposit it into your new account, she explained. Fine, I snapped. Just get it done. Consider it done, she replied. Once you arrive, I'll hand you a check for $311 and you can proceed. What in the world are you talking about, Carly? I erupted. There's nearly $500,000 in that account. There was, she began. I know exactly how much was there, I seethed. That's precisely what happened last week. Chief, this has to be against the law, I protested. It's not illegal, he clarified, but it's pretty rotten, yeah, he added. The bank enforces a minimum balance policy. If your balance drops below $50, you'll incur a $10 fee. You don't have enough remaining to cover even the fee. CJ handed me the phone, and I began conversing with my attorney, my words interspersed with sobs. I recounted how Mark sold the house, drained our bank accounts, and liquidated all our investments. Logging into our investment account, I discovered Mark had cashed out everything, leaving just one share in the cheese company. "That's pretty clever," remarked my lawyer. "He got ahead of you. It's all perfectly legal. Until the divorce is initiated, he can do whatever he wants with his assets." "So he took everything?" "He's likely going to cash out and stash it in offshore accounts beyond our reach. He's aiming to boost his wealth to the point where you won't get a dime in the divorce. And quitting his job, genius move. When he arrives in court broke and unemployed, you two can just part ways with no financial obligations." "I doubt he'll even show up," I remarked. "I think he skipped town. He left me before I could leave him. I have no clue where he went." "Hey," my lawyer inquired, "how do you plan to serve him with divorce papers if you don't know his whereabouts?" "Can I divorce him without all this hassle?" I questioned. "What about abandonment?" "It takes 3 years in this state. Do you have enough funds to last that long?" he queried. "Remember, I just mentioned he drained all our damn money," I seethed. "Well, no money means I can't afford your fees." Click. And again, all I heard was beeps, accompanied by the movers snickering under their breath. That's how my life spiraled into chaos. I temporarily crashed at my mom's place. Mark was thorough. He sold off or gave away all our possessions. He took all 3 cars, both his Mustangs and the winter Jeep. He kept my new Lexus, but I couldn't cover the payments, so it was repossessed. I consulted with several pro bono lawyers, and they all agreed I needed to stir up some serious trouble to counter his actions. Almost every lawyer, upon hearing the facts, deemed his actions brilliant and entirely lawful. There's no law saying a man must remain with his wife just because they're married. Nor is there any prohibition against selling a jointly owned home. Mark had full entitlement to withdraw funds from our accounts since he was the primary account holder. He came out on top. I tried reaching him, but his number was disconnected. There was a message there. I was certain he left me some sort of clue, but I was too dense to grasp it. Days turned into weeks with no word from him. Weeks stretched into months. I lost CJ within the first month. He struggled to make rent after his girlfriend left him for another guy the same day Mark abandoned me. What were the odds? One day, while listening to the radio, I broke down in tears. There was a band I vaguely knew of called the Eagles. Their lead singer, Glenn Frey, sang a song called Already Gone. The tale mirrored my life so closely that tears welled in my eyes. The gibberish Mark uttered or cawed to me on that day of his preemptive strike was lifted straight from the song. My life was filled with hard labor. I toiled 6 days a week alongside my mother, cleaning hotel rooms. Many guests reminded me of my past life. I habitually took my blessings for granted, always believing I deserved more. After just a few days of struggling to survive, I began to regret how I treated my husband. It pained me to recall that I used to spend more on makeup in 2 weeks than I earned in my current salary. At 43, I knew my opportunities were limited. The only odd thing was that after 3 years of hardship and poor diet, I gained a few pounds and stopped coloring my hair. One day, upon returning home, I found an invitation awaiting me. The following day, I received an invite to a local cafe. Though unsigned, I knew it was from Mark. Suddenly, it clicked. Mark could have emptied our accounts, but he left an odd sum, $311. It's been 3 years, 1 month, and 1 week since he left me. That's it. My sentence was served, my penance over. Damn, I wished I had realized this sooner. I could have dieted and reclaimed my figure. Then I realized it didn't matter. Mark always loved me. Blonde hair and ample chest were my choice, while I strove to look my best. A realization struck. I suddenly remembered the song's final line Mark quoted before he departed. It happens so often that we live in chains that we don't even know we have the key. There was a message in the invitation. It signified that we had come full circle. I was certain this meant he was ready to reintegrate me into his life. It suddenly dawned on me that I had been a fool. I was always in control. While I idled, Mark worked tirelessly to fulfill my every wish. The only time he refused was when I tried to coerce him into something he didn't want to do. When I attempted to divorce him, to leave him, he took it personally. True to form, he granted my wish and left first. Oddly, I had spent the last 3 years fearing the inevitable, expecting divorce papers to arrive sooner or later, yet they never did. Now, I felt I understood why. Mark still loved me, and I eagerly anticipated our reunion. I arrived at the bar slightly early. A disheveled bartender showing signs of heavy drinking with his ruddy complexion approached my table. "You've put on weight," he remarked. "How many donuts have you eaten?" Have you drunk enough to forget your own shortcomings? What brings you here, CJ? I thought you still worked here, he retorted. I received an invitation for lunch at a cafe across the street, I explained. I came to gather courage. This is odd, he observed. Too much of a coincidence. What do you mean? I inquired. I also received an invitation, he revealed. Did yours include a cryptic riddle? It wasn't much of a mystery, I replied. It was Mark's way of signaling he wants me back. What exactly did it say? He probed. It read, "We've come full circle. I'm ready to give you what you want," I recounted. You're right, he acknowledged. Yours differs from mine. Mine posed a question. Why does a squirrel hide nuts in its nest? I'm clueless about that, I admitted. I believe it means Shannon wants me back, he concluded. Squirrels hide nuts to protect them from birds. Birds is slang for women. Shannon's telling me she doesn't want me with other women. I think they colluded to reunite us after a period of suffering, wanting us to accept them on their terms. Forget all this, I exclaimed angrily, abandoning all I had learned over the past 3 years. If Mark wants me back, he'll have to work hard for it. With resolve, I stormed out of the bar and made my way across the street to the cafe. Taking a seat at a small table, I scanned the cafe and spotted CJ's entrance. He settled at a nearby table on the sidewalk where 2 college guys played hacky sack. Seeing CJ, I pondered his riddle and realized his mistake. Despite waving desperately, he remained engrossed with the guys until he eventually noticed me. His wave and headshake left me puzzled. As CJ sat, the guys nearby lost control of their bag, which flew toward him and toppled his glass. Rising angrily, CJ was struck in the groin as another bag fell before him. One of the guys attempted to skillfully kick the bag back up, but missed, fortunately leaving it undamaged. However, his foot landed a mighty blow to CJ's lap, eliciting a piercing scream. I hurried over as waiters tried to assist him, but all they could do was help him to his feet as the ambulance arrived to take him away. I informed him, "Your interpretation was off." Through his pain, he groaned. "What?" "She didn't want your return," I clarified. "It's not about birds, it's about reproductive organs." "Doesn't matter," he grumbled, attempting to speak further, but was interrupted by the appearance of a girl resembling a college student, tall and fair-haired like me in my youth. She approached with a briefcase and gum in hand. "Are you Ann Clayton?" she inquired. "Yes," I answered sharply. Handing me a stack of papers, she explained, "Here's what you've been waiting for." "You've been served," she spat. Glancing around the cafe, I spotted him. Suddenly, the riddle's meaning dawned on me. Full circle signified achieving what I desired, not necessarily Mark's return. This meant I got what I wanted after Mark and I split up. We got divorced. The issue was it wasn't what I desired anymore. I yearned for the life I once knew and lost. To be frank, I was accustomed to living modestly. Most importantly, I longed to reconnect with Mark himself. Then I spotted him. He appeared well, better than when we parted ways. He seemed content. However, he wasn't by himself. A woman accompanied him. She had red hair, was youthful, stunningly beautiful, and noticeably pregnant. Between them, holding each of their hands, was a little girl who perfectly blended their features. She sported Mark's hair color and her mother's vibrant green eyes. This petite girl gave me the same peculiar smile Mark had. Perhaps it's genetic, or she somehow sensed the situation and its significance, just like I did the moment I saw them together. I realized it was truly over. There was no hope of rekindling with Mark. Emotionally, he was distant. There was no use in vying for his affection. This redhead wouldn't let him go. She offered him her heart, love, and undoubtedly her physical presence. She also bore him children. Reviewing the divorce papers, I noticed Mark's retaliatory stance against me. I aimed to secure financial compensation through legal means. I needed his money, but not him. In the end, I got neither. He divorced me, claiming abandonment, allowing him to retain all his assets and his newfound happiness. I glanced up from the paperwork for one final glimpse of the man I'd lost, but it was too late. He had already departed, leaving me with nothing but tears.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Ethan King, and I suppose you could call me a certified genius. I have an IQ of 168 and hold 7 degrees, 3 of which are doctorates. I'm the epitome of a nerd, 6'1", weighing 158 pounds, with thick glasses to match. Socially, I'm pretty shy, especially around beautiful women, which has been a challenge for me. Though I do have one surprising asset that most people wouldn't guess. I'm well endowed and, well, I know how to use it. Not exactly the kind of thing that comes up in most conversations, but it has shaped a part of my life in a very unexpected way. So, what does all that have to do with anything? Probably not much, but it explains why I've sometimes found myself as the other guy in certain relationships. I graduated high school at 13 and earned my first degree in business administration by 15. By the time I was 24 and finally ready to leave the academic world behind, I'd added a few more bachelor's degrees in industrial security and physics. I went on to earn a master's in information technology and doctorates in electrical engineering, advanced mathematics, and computer science. I didn't just rack up degrees for fun, though. I turned all that knowledge into something real by founding my own company, King & Associates. We're a consulting firm that advises on almost anything businesses or individuals might need. And it's been a successful venture, one I'm proud of. I met the woman of my dreams while in college while I was working on my master's in information technology. Her name was Kathy Brown, and she was a junior struggling with her studies in math and accounting at the same college where I was attending. I was tutoring students to derive spending money while I was at school. I had several scholarships in a few fields, so my tuition, books, and most fees were satisfied, but I still needed money to be able to live on. I hated dorms, since I always got some jock or party animal as a roommate, and that was not conducive to my studying habits. So tutoring allowed me to gain enough money to afford a cheap studio apartment not far from campus. I had put a sheet of paper with my qualifications for tutoring on as many bulletin boards as possible all over campus with my phone number in little tear-off strips, and I was bringing in well over $5,000 a month in additional money when I met Kathy. I was 21 when I met Kathy. She called me hoping that I could give her some time to help her with her problems. As it happened, I did have a couple of openings in my schedule where I could tutor her. When she showed up at my apartment, I was totally flummoxed. Here was this 20-year-old gorgeous blonde model that took my heart and soul into her eyes and locked them away forever. Beautiful women have always intimidated me, but this creature captured my heart, and I acted like a shy child. Yeah, several of my tutored students were jocks and cheerleader types that needed help in one subject or another, and at first, I had a hard time tutoring beautiful girl. I was just too intimidated. However, I knew in order to make any money at this game, I had to be able to talk to and interact with these women. So, I developed a fail-safe mechanism for me to picture them in a muumuu and 50 to 100 pounds heavier. For years, public speakers have tried the trick of seeing their audience in their underwear to stave off stage fright. So, I theorized that if it worked for them, this should work for me. And lo and behold, it did. When some young thing leaned over in front of me and showed me some cleavage, I thought of a dairy cow and her udders and no more sexual thoughts or shyness. This system always worked for any beautiful woman until Kathy. The only picture that came into my mind with Kathy was her and I, in bed and making love. It might seem like, at 21 and being the epitome of a nerd, I'd still be inexperienced in relationships. However, life had other plans. While many of the young women I tutored came from affluent backgrounds and could pay for my academic help, some had fewer resources. In those cases, they offered something else, insight into relationships and intimacy. I lost my virginity to a college senior named Lola Jones, who needed help preparing for her finals. With limited means to pay for tutoring, she proposed a different kind of exchange. I would help her academically, and in return, she would teach me about love and intimacy. It was an unexpected opportunity for me to learn things that couldn't be found in textbooks. Lola took her role as a mentor seriously, and our tutoring sessions evolved into something more. It was a unique learning experience, one that shaped my understanding of both relationships and the complexities of life at a young age. She had a lot to teach me, and it seemed like a very one-sided bargain. I was 17 at the time. In the month that I helped her review the subjects for her finals, I learned many ways to satisfy the daughters of Venus. I have since that time repaid her kindness to so many women, I have lost count. Well, not really. At the time I met Kathy, it was 57 different women I had tutored in their college subjects, and they tutored me in the ways of love. All the women I had encountered and learned from over the years didn't prepare me for Kathy. She was different. The moment I laid eyes on her, it felt like my world flipped. I was no longer the confident man I had become, but was instead thrown back to the shy, awkward boy I had been at 12 years old. It reminded me of the time Marilyn Fisk asked me to the senior prom, on a dare. I still remember how I froze, utterly flustered, not knowing how to respond. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounded in my chest, and all I could manage was to stand there, with my mouth opening and closing, as if I were a fish gasping for air. I eventually stammered out something like, "You want me to go to the dance with you?" Meeting Kathy brought all of that back, except this time. It felt even more intense. It was as if all the confidence I had built over the years vanished in an instant. "No, Poindexter, we wanted to see if I asked you if you pissed your pants. I guess we were wrong. See ya, Poindexter." And she turned around and left giggling and then laughing with the 5 girls with her. Needless to say, I was the laughing stock of the whole school for about 2 weeks. I was finally able to welcome Kathy to my apartment by gestures alone. Once we introduced ourselves and I gave her my fee paper, things calmed down some. Once I knew what subjects she needed help in, I could throw myself into the tutoring. It was after the third session that I asked Kathy for a date. I did reserve either a Friday or Saturday night available for dates, as many of my students preferred to stay in those nights with me. God forbid that we be seen outside of the normal tutor-tutee relationship. Their reputation would be ruined if they were seen in public with a nerd such as me. I felt deep in my heart that Kathy was different, so I asked her for a date to go to a movie on Saturday evening. It was a Tuesday evening when I asked her, and she responded with, "Ethan, I would love to go out with you, however, I do have a steady boyfriend at the moment, and I don't think he would approve. Maybe sometime later we can get together. If I can pass these subjects, I will be able to stay another year, and who knows what will happen by then." That was one of the gentlest put-downs I had ever received from any girl. I was smitten from then on. After 5 sessions, Kathy was up to speed and no longer needed my help. We saw each other around on campus, and she did send a couple of girls my way for tutoring, but I lost touch with her. But I had heard that her boyfriend at the time became her fiancé shortly after her last session. I figured that she was the one that got away. During my time after college, I took many martial arts classes due to my tall and lean stature. I wanted to be able to defend myself since my outer appearance would seem to make me a target for anyone who wanted what I had accumulated. I became a 4th-degree black belt in a couple of different arts and graduated onto Krav Maga. So although I looked to be a prime target for bullies, I was one dangerous dude. Fast forward 7 years to the next time I met Kathy. I went to Gates Manufacturing for a consultation on a manufacturing operation, and I met Kathy in the accounting section when I was setting up how and when I was to be paid. I certainly remembered her, and she remembered me too, which was quite a shock. I had met several other men and women whom I had tutored over the years, and none of them recognized me. I immediately noticed the name Kathy Cooper on her desk nameplate. I did remember that she was going with a Brandon Cooper in college, so I assumed that she married him either during her senior year or shortly thereafter. We talked of old times for a couple of minutes when she whispered to me, "Is it true what the rumors were about you? That you are a very skilled lover with a unique, unusually large..." "Yes, Mrs. Cooper, that is quite true, however. I do not plow another man's field." "I see. But would you plow someone's field if it was authorized by the owner? Are you implying that there is a standing agreement between the owner and that the field in question could be tilled and cultivated by others?" "If you're asking if we have an open marriage, yes. And I would like to repay my debt to someone who helped me far more than they were aware of. That's how it all started. What I didn't know was that Brandon and Kathy didn't have an open marriage. She was looking for some outside excitement. They were approaching their 7th year together as man and wife, and the sex was getting boring. Add to that, Brandon was traveling a lot and leaving Kathy home alone, and you get the typical situation for cheating. Needless to say, I never knew until we were found out that she was just cheating on Brandon. We set up a time and place, my townhouse in the city, and a schedule for when she would come to see me and we could get it on. She became obsessed with me, and that is how we got caught. At first, she only set up dates when her husband was gone. But 4 months later, she was visiting me in the evening after her work and telling her husband that she was having a drink or two with the girls after work. That was her downfall. I think if she had kept it to Friday evenings after work and not stayed for a double, we probably would have never been found out. It was a Friday night about 7 when I heard the door chime, and I grabbed a robe and went to the door. There stood 2 men, both almost 6 feet. Both were fairly well built, but a little paunchy in the middle. The one in front had a red face, and the one behind had a camera and took my picture. "Excuse me, gentlemen. May I help you?" "You damn right you can get out of my way, so I can get to that cheating 304 I married," said the red-faced man. I let them in, and then I asked, "I take it that you are referring to Mrs. Cooper. She is in the bedroom to the left. I was informed that you two had an open marriage, and I had your permission to dally with the lady in question." From the living room, red-faced Brandon Cooper said, "She's no lady, and you're damned right I never authorized this little get-together," as he stormed into the bedroom with the photographer in tow. I heard several screams, whereupon I quickly entered the bedroom to see Brandon slapping Kathy. I stepped in and grabbed his arm as he set about another blow, but this time with a fist instead of an open-handed slap. I spun him around and then planted a fist in his stomach, and he oofed and sank to the floor trying to breathe. The photographer had been taking a video of the proceedings, and I asked kindly for him to make a copy of the video from me as well as Mr. Cooper. "Yes, sir, Mr. King. Whatever you want." I never saw someone do that to Brandon before. He is usually the one to be the victor. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here to photograph the infidelity." "I have no problem with that, Mr. Ah. Ned Flanders, Mr. King. I'm a friend whom Mr. Cooper wanted along to get evidence for his divorce. I moved over to Ned with the grace of a dancer and held my hand out to shake as I said, I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Flanders. Are you a professional photographer, or is this just a hobby? About then Brandon started to get up. I turned rapidly and stared into his eyes, and he sat back down again. I guess the look on my face and the cold manner of my eyes stayed him from any more shenanigans. Ned glanced at Brandon and then to me and said, More a hobby, but I sure would like to do more than I'm able to at the moment. Why? Well, I may have use for a photographer a little later, on a project I am about to undertake. I have a little problem with someone selling some product for a client of mine, and I sure could use someone with your skills for this project. Maybe I could use you on some other projects as well. What do you think? Oh yes, this has nothing to do with this little mess, and it doesn't hinge on anything that happens as a result of this matter tonight. I accept full responsibility for being the other guy in this triangle, Mr. Cooper, but I was approached, not the other way around, I said to Brandon. That is awfully nice of you, Mr. King. I knew that Kathy knew you before. She said that you helped her a lot in school, but I never expected this. I'm sorry I barged in here like I did. I just expected some lowlife sleaze wife stealer. I never expected to meet such a gentleman. May I get up now? I think we need to take this to the other room and let the 304 get dressed and leave. I'll be divorcing her soon. You can have her if you like. I think not, since once a cheater, always a cheater. At least that is what I have heard. Brandon, Ned, and I retired to the living room, and I asked if anyone would like a drink. I fixed drinks for the three of us, 2 beers, and a soda for me. We talked for about 5 minutes, and I could hear water running so Kathy had taken a shower. She afterwards came out of the bedroom dressed and said, Good night, Ethan. I'm truly remorseful about all this. Then she stood in front of Brandon and said, I'm really very sorry for all this, Brandon. I just got caught up in something I should have never even thought about, but I heard about Ethan and ever since college, I have always regretted that I never went out with him, and then I found out he had a big tool and knew how to use it. Well, I'm very sorry I hurt you like that, Brandon. Please try to accept that this will never happen again. That I can promise you. I love you too much for that. My God, woman, do you even listen to what comes out of your mouth? You just said that you loved me too much to cheat again, but you did cheat on me. So if you love me too much to cheat, how did you do it the first time? I can promise you, though, that it will never happen to me again, because I'm going to divorce you for this. Kathy just dropped to the floor in front of Brandon's chair and hugged his legs, bawling her eyes out. None of the 3 men sitting could understand a single word that Kathy was mumbling. It was just noise to them. Brandon had had enough and said crossly, Just go home, woman. I'll be along later. However, get used to the idea that there will be a divorce. How bloody and dirty it becomes depends on how much you fight it. So go home and think about your future. Kathy reluctantly got up and went to the door. She looked back and said, I'm truly sorry, Brandon. With that she left, and there was a bit of silence for a while. The 3 of us talked a while, mostly about how Kathy set this up, how long it had been going on. I did explain to Brandon that I didn't try to stop this because I told him of my love for Kathy in college, and that once I found out about him and Kathy going out, I only tutored her, and then I left her alone. I had too many other girls who were willing and available to mess with someone who was taken. Brandon and Ned left in a much better frame of mind than when I first answered the door. Ned said he would call me later once the dust settled. In the case of Kathy and Brandon, I was called to give a deposition during their divorce proceedings, and all I did was tell the truth. Kathy's lawyer attempted to paint the situation as if I had some lingering vendetta because I missed my chance with Kathy in college. They suggested I was seeking revenge against Brandon by getting involved with Kathy. However, I clarified that I knew of 5 other women who could verify that I had no interest in interfering with solid marriages. The only reason I got involved with Kathy was because I received a call from someone claiming to be Brandon, saying that they had an open marriage and that I had his permission to be with her. This revelation turned out to be even more problematic for Kathy, as it came to light that she had a coworker impersonate Brandon to make that call. The deposition was recorded on video, and a stenographer was present to transcribe everything. Once I signed the transcript, my part in the legal process was done. I never heard from Kathy again after that. She apparently left town. As for Brandon, he vanished from my life as well after the court hearing. Ned, the person who originally brought this situation to light, turned out to be a great addition to my company, and we've since moved on to work on bigger projects. Looking back, this whole episode was just another example of how life twists and turns. Whether you're on the receiving end of betrayal or the one involved in the betrayal, it seems that in the end, life continues regardless. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.